Okay, that's recording to my computer now,
Okay,
Okay.
here we
which is
go.
the way I like it.
Well, um, are the rebates and so forth for EVs still in force?
As of 9:35 this morning, yes, they were still on.
Okay.
We'll see. I don't know. 11 senators have said they don't want them to go away, but we'll see.
Hey, Alan, yeah, I noticed you had your screen. You're presenting today, right? I noticed you had your first screen, your first slide up.
Yeah,
Do you have any videos that you're going to be playing?
no videos playing. I
Okay,
have
great,
links, but I don't play any. So,
great. That's fine. I
Then we
was
can
just
do some
you're
recording.
prepared then. Yeah,
yeah.
sounds like you're all up to date. Good.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that I talk about. One of them is full self-driving cars that, how many years ago Teslas drove between San Francisco and LA by themselves, and a car in the last few months drove across North America with 6 seconds of human touching the wheel, doing something across the USA. So that's an interesting video. But there's a lot of other things. I mean, you know, depends upon what you watch, I guess.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it's in somebody's interest to make sure that every mishap or failure of a self-driving vehicle makes front page news. Um, so
Yeah.
there's definitely a um, not a battle, but there's a bit of a it's controversial, and people are trying to protect their interest.
Yeah, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning on Waymo, and I read it and they made a slide on it. I'm going to talk about that when we get to self-driving. They're at 20 million rides now. Well, so we'll see. 100 people die a day approximately, and millions of crashes a year. So we'll see if the robots can do better,
Well, or if the robots are out to kill us.
or if they're out to kill us. That's
Yeah,
right.
we
Probably
get
both.
you gotta we have to counter, or that industry has to counter uh, the fear instilled by Hollywood.
Yes, exactly. So, all right.
Well, we still have about 20 minutes till the actual presentation.
Well, Tesla. Speaking of Tesla, Tesla has well, they've announced their lower price car, and it was really confusing because some of the information says it's about $11,000, but then others say it's about $24,000.
Yeah.
There's some strange things in the.
They introduced that to compete with the Chinese, but they may not have to compete so hard now because of the tariffs. So,
Maybe, yeah.
Well, even at 24, it would be almost half of what you would pay for a Tesla.
Understood.
I know that that's about what I paid for my Mini Cooper DSE that I've got,
Yeah.
and I'm very happy with it.
Well, we're looking for a new car, and uh, my spouse has invested in Tesla occasionally, but she's not interested in electric car or hybrid or plug-in, anything like that. But with the $11,000 price tag, she was almost convinced. I don't know if twice that would. I don't know what her tolerance is.
Well, I know that the Seagull, which is the Chinese, what is that, the BYD version of
Yeah.
an affordable car, is in that neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if how many of these vehicles would be fun to own in Minneapolis because of their, I think, for example, when we got the Mini, we got uh, the what's that term for? I'm having we got the heat pump in it,
Hmm.
as well as the electric seats and the electric steering wheel. It's called the winter package.
Oh yeah.
Um, and you know, I think it's. I know that my neighbor, for example, right next door to me here, had a BMW i3, and it was really designed to be an electric car, but there were times when it had a hard time on icy, wintry days getting out of the alley, for example. It just wasn't a particularly good car for winter driving.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Mini, we've been able to, because it's heavier. I think the Mini SE is 300 some pounds heavier than the equivalent S version of the Mini Cooper, the gas powered Cooper. And it's you know, because of the battery, it's a little bit heavier, but it certainly corners nicely. And they claim that it's designed so that it's balanced. The front and the back of the car are balanced, so it's a nice steering car and so forth.
Well, my Prius is about 18 years old now, but I'm still in kind of a wait and see mode, because Japanese seem to be really pushing hydrogen power now, and I don't know how that's going to compare in the next couple of years. I don't know if Alan, you're going to do any kind of comparison of EVs to other types
Hydrogen's
of,
dead. That's the bottom line. It works in long haul, but the problem is the infrastructure's got to be a lot of time and money to keep compressed gas available. So
Yeah, well, that was the problem with EVs for a while too.
yeah,
I
I
think
don't
it
know. It
still
doesn't
is.
show up in any forecasts in the next 5 to 10 years that I've seen from Bloomberg, McKinsey, or consulting companies like that. So the answer is dead. That's the quote. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Wow.
It's changed.
I see David's lips moving, but there's no sound from David.
What's David doing in his car? Looks like he's trying to log into his screen on his car there.
He's on the road.
He's on the road. From where? Don't hear you, David.
Yeah, I can't read lips, sorry.
When you do some.
You're not muted, but you're not providing any audio.
David, if you're on your phone, take your don't use your earmuffs. Just just use the microphone on your phone.
He's I don't know. Something's going on. He's pointing.
I think
Oh,
he's
no,
trying to use the phone for sound. I'm not sure.
doesn't know. Something's going on. You can hear us though, right, David? Yes, but we don't hear you.
Is it connected through your phone? Through your car, I mean.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it going through the car? Power.
Isn't he wearing earbuds?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got
David,
headphones, but no
unplug
microphone.
Yeah, so his
Unplug it.
speakers work, but his mic doesn't.
Got it. He has no mic. Now I understand completely. Yeah,
But it's
Well, maybe if you unplug the headphones, you'll be able to get both.
you should just
That's
come right out
exactly
of the
what I'm
speaker
trying
on
to
the
tell
cell
him is
phone.
unplug the headphones
Doesn't work.
and
Okay.
use the speaker.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Hmm.
All right.
You know American Sign Language?
Not working.
Nah, can't read his lips.
So I think, do we have somebody new here? Jerry, would you like to introduce yourself? I know you're in the middle of eating something. Sorry about that.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah, I'm a two-time Tesla owner. Been driving the cars for about 10 years now. I do a lot of cross-country driving, but I'm continually disappointed in Elon Musk's personal behavior and political behavior. So I'm thinking maybe it's time to move on to something else.
Right.
One of the
I see a lot of stickers on Tesla saying, I'm not in it for I'm in it for the environment, not for Elon's kind of thing.
Yep. Mine says, I bought this car before Elon went crazy.
Yeah.
And anyway, regardless of politics, there's so many new offerings out there for EVs. I've been looking at a few, stopped at a couple of dealers this week and drove the new Cadillac Optic and the Chevy Blazer EV and so on. So there's definitely some interesting options out there. My dilemma is I've been very spoiled by the Tesla supercharger network, especially on cross-country trips. I can pretty much plan on, jumping in, driving it for 3 hours, recharging for 30 minutes, and back on my way. I don't have that sense of security with any other car I see out there. Because you ask the dealers, can I charge this at a Tesla station? They, oh yeah, no problem. And then I talk to some other people and they say, well, you're going to have a reduced charge rate. All the chargers won't be available to non-Tesla cars and so on. So if anybody has any input on that, I'd love to hear it.
Are you going to get into that, Alan?
Supercharger is 50% of all plugs to plug into at fast place charges to places to charge, and it's the gold standard that everybody measures against at 5 nines of reliability. The charging network is like the app store for the iPhone. There is no phone without the charging network. So, that is what it is.
And
It's getting better,
changing. Every time I've been to, an EV Go or a charge point or something, I'd say more than half the time it's a no-go. They're broken, the cables are cut, there's no connection, no electrical connection. Very disappointing. So I've kind of given up on those. But I've had a couple instances where I was forced to go because the town I stopped in, for example, we spent a couple of days in Taos, New Mexico. That's all they had. Luckily, it was a public charger at the city hall, and the usage was based on make a donation if you like to. So, but it also took about 6 hours to top off my car.
Yeah.
So who cuts
the
cables?
Copper thieves.
Copper thieves for the copper?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times they're cut because people just want to act out revenge on the electric car community.
Yes, I agree.
Or Elon Musk.
Well, the cutting cables was before Elon's craziness.
Yeah. So I do have a slide on that. 29, we'll get there.
Okay, good.
It's 82.6% non-Tesla charging. So
I remember when I was at Shutterfly, we had 4 charging stations. They were level 2, which since they were free for us as employees, we had, that was really nice. But my charging station, there was one charging station that was near the edge of the aisle. But my charging station was the one that was next to another car I was on the gas car side of the 4. And they would keep kind of nudging the space by parking halfway into my lane, so to speak. And so I had to take photographs and report them to my supervisors about that. And I don't know. They call that icing if you park a gas car into a charging station situation.
Icing.
It's very, very disappointing.
What?
Icing mean ice cars sitting.
Oh, okay. Icing. Got it. I see it now. Okay.
internal combustion engine.
I missed that. I thought you
We had a situation.
Okay, go ahead. Never mind.
We were at a Casey's in Iowa last year, and they had a bank of Tesla chargers there. So we were charging up, and all of a sudden, in come roaring 4 pickup trucks, and they all park in front of the Tesla superchargers. and go into Casey's. So I'm debating, and they were like all teenagers, probably right off of school. And I was debating, do I dare say anything to these guys? Luckily, they came out within about 3 minutes. Everybody had their Mountain Dew or their Red Bull and their bag of Doritos, and away they went. So I didn't have to subject myself to a confrontation.
So they're not going to live that long anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, being an ex-Iowan, but I go down to there to see my brother a lot. It's a little disheartening. There's such a pickup. It's a rural community with rural mindset, and pickup trucks are rural, you know.
Well, they're useful.
A lot of city trucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a political statement. It's rural.
I don't see them using. I don't see a lot of those trucks being used for anything more than just land cruising around. I mean, if you were to take the amount of trucks that are bought that are literally used for truck kinds of tasks, they would only have about 1/10 of the trucks out there that you see.
1 out of every 5 vehicles in North America is a truck.
And the dealers and car manufacturers love to sell them. They push them because the profit margin is much higher on trucks.
Because they're a business and you can write them off. That's why you get $70,000, $80,000 trucks, because it can be depreciated.
When I was at my Chevy dealer a couple days ago to test drive the Blazer EV, they also had a Silverado E sitting there. Beautiful car, $110,000.
Huh.
Yep. 200 miles of range, or 440 miles of battery range, right? 200 kilowatt hour battery.
Yep. There again, same dilemma. Where do you go to charge it when you're on the road?
I thought GM and Ford went with the Tesla charging adapters.
Yeah, you can.
They did. I've never talked to anyone who's actually used one to find out what kind of success they've had.
Yeah.
Well, I think that you have to have the adapter, but you also kind of have to have an app that works with Tesla. And when I was listening to some lectures or some discussions with Jim Farley. I don't know if it was maybe Lex Freeman or some kind of an interview I heard with Jim Farley. They were going to work out a deal with Tesla for Ford owners to have the right app to do the transaction.
Ford works today. Chevy Bolts work on Tesla if you start them manually. But we'll get into it. There's a new charging network from 8 of the biggest car companies out there called IANA, and they just actually are completing a big charging stop here in northern Minnesota, or in North Twin Cities. Dick's, what's it called? Dick's something.
The sporting goods?
No, it's I got a picture of it. I'll show you. It's it's basically, all the big car dealers except Ford and Tesla, and then a bunch of smaller ones. But yeah, I have a slide coming up on that.
Now, Alan, are you from Minneapolis, or are you?
Well, since 85, I grew up in Eastern Iowa as a farm boy, and I went to computer school after some crazy stuff in being a DJ for a while, and then got into software in 85 and rode the mainframe to PC migration and then off to the cloud. So
I came up from Iowa in '88 myself.
yeah, I got a job target.
Say a general question. I was under the impression that some people were meeting in person. Sorry, David.
Yeah,
Sorry, David. I can't.
We did that as an experiment last week.
Oh, okay.
It was partially successful, so there's still some bugs to be worked out on that.
We
Oh,
learned
yeah,
a
we
lot.
had some sound issues. Yes. Okay.
We learned a lot.
The coolest little device that I've ever seen is called an OWL, OWL. You
Oh,
basically
yeah.
plug it into the side of the computer and it does a 360 of the room and it focuses on who's talking with the cameras through AI.
Mhm.
I've seen that in several of my presentations now. So
Yeah.
when I do like the Rotary Club or League of Women Voters, they broadcast online a lot.
I have a question for you, Alan. Your presentation that's coming up in about 5 minutes. Are you going to talk about the batteries themselves, storage? Because there's been a lot of research and progress in batteries, and my question is, how much longer are we going to be stuck with lithium ion batteries? I don't know if you
Question.
address
Solid
it.
state's coming. I don't know. Yeah, I do have a couple slides on that. Well, I have a whole section on that. But yeah, I mean, we're just starting to see the first cars in late 2025 from Toyota, of all people, to do solid state batteries. Mercedes and a couple other companies are testing solid state batteries. Would be double, basically half the cost and double the miles. But we're looking at 600 miles, and the cost of batteries is dropping pretty quickly. The stat that I use is 99% down in the last 30 years. So, and still falling. So we're looking at in the next 5 years having 200 miles for $2,000 batteries. So
That's encouraging.
very, very dramatic.
I've had solar panels on my house for 6 or 7 years, but I didn't get a battery wall
Oh,
or anything
yeah.
like that because it was really expensive back then.
Yeah.
So I've been waiting for battery prices to drop.
Yeah, there's been a switch. The default there, the gold standard again was the Tesla Powerwall, but there's now
Right.
people looking at the Enphase batteries, and I think it's the EKG4 batteries. They're getting a lot of attention nowadays. The batteries are interesting. It's the software and the cloud and the AI algorithms that really make the batteries magical, if you want to think of that from a capability to, if you bid into the market, if you do like a virtual power plant in California or Texas or Maine, place, I talk about virtual power plants in the presentation as well. So
Okay. Good.
Real quick, Alan, you perked my interest. Eastern Iowa, we're talking Iowa City maybe, or whereabouts?
20 miles west of Dubuque on 52, a little town called Holy Cross. That's where
Right.
my sister's still on the farm.
Now, I happen to know, I went to the University of Northern Iowa, and I happen to know Bob Dorr from KUNI
Great guy.
and the Blue Band and all
Yeah.
of the music that came out of that organization,
Yeah.
tags and so forth. All right,
Yeah.
that's all I'm just gonna.
Yeah. Anybody listen to KAAY back in the day? Beaker Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I grew up on an Illinois farm, Alan, and I remember a lot of nights out on the tractor listening to that because the
Oh, yeah.
signal was so clear after dark.
It's Clear Channel, KAAY, man. Like WLS out of Chicago and a lot of other Clear Channel stations. If you were out on the tractor, you had an AM radio, and that was, a lot of regional, small radio stations were AM. They went to lower power, but it was funny. So I graduated in 76, and then I went to college for a little while and then got interested in radio, and I moved to the Quad Cities, and I was on the radio there for a number of years. And the station I was on was KSTT 1170 AM, and we changed the nighttime pattern to shoot straight north like a blowtorch. And it went right over my mom and dad's house. So they literally listened to me like from the very first time I ever went on the radio until I ended up in, I used to be on KDWB up here in the cities doing weekends. So anyway, they were always listening when I was on the AM side, but never on the FM side. So
Yeah, even in town at
KIOA,
night.
when I was a child in Des Moines, Iowa, KIOA was the
yeah.
rock station.
Yeah, like CCO up here, 630 WCCO. All the Clear Channel AMs were the thing back in that day. Now it's, moved to streaming and FM, mostly streaming and mostly playlist driven streaming like Spotify.
Yeah. Well, it's 10 o'clock. We should probably start your presentation.
All right.
I should ask how my sound is.
It sounds good, H-Tom.
This is the microphone that wouldn't work last week.
All right.
So
Sounds
I'm
good.
not sure what was going on.
So as far as questions and comments, how do you want to handle that, Alan?
I'll get into that. I got a whole flow here. So let me,
Okay, so no questions or comments until Alan's ready for them. And we'll raise our hands
oh, you don't
by
have to get
using-
that scientific.
by using reactions when you want to
Yeah.
make comment.
All right, let's see if I can get this thing into slide mode. There. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
All right,
Wonderful.
that's me.
It's teeny.
All right, so let's keep going here. So,
It's too small to read.
all right, I'm on full screen, so you're gonna have to make yours bigger. Okay, so here's the plan, here's the flow. I'm going to walk through these bullet points and kind of make a few comments about them. And then I'm going to take a break and we're going to do the normal 20-25 minute, what I call my normal EV TED Talk. And then we're going to come back to this list. So I'm kind of priming you with this list first to think about and to listen to what I say, quote unquote, normally versus what the futurists want to talk about, right? And I'm really excited to present to you guys because, I mean, I've done the Thunderbird Club, I've done the Scottish Drinking Club, I've done the Corvette Club, I've done probably 20 different city sustainability organizations, League of Women Voters, all over. So I haven't done the Futurist Club, so this is kind of exciting. But why I say that is many times people think that when I'm giving the facts, well-researched facts, they think I'm talking about the future. And I'm like, no, it's just because you're not following the space as closely. That's why you think it's the future. So we're going to kind of have a what to think about and think about here, and then we're going to do the facts, and then we're going to come back and think about this again. So we are going to talk about batteries a lot, actually. The price is dropping dramatically. By 2035, we expect to have 200 miles from a $2,000 battery versus $22,000 today. And that's down from about $35,000 or $40,000 going back 10, 15 years. So you'll see a couple charts where we talk about the price dropping dramatically and what that means, because we're going to cross over into lower price than a gas car. At the sticker price to buy day one, it's already way cheaper when you look at it from a total cost of ownership and what it takes to drive. So we're going to talk about battery advances, moving from nickel metal cobalt into lithium ion into solid state. What happens when the battery charges in 6 minutes like it takes to fill your gas tank in 6 minutes? What about EV battery recycling? What happens to mining in Minnesota if we dig up iron ore and maybe we take some copper out of Minnesota? Hopefully we can find some rare earth minerals in Minnesota. I don't know much about that space, but I find it quite interesting. And I have had several people over the years, I've done this presentation for over 10 years now, people come up to me and say, well, I'll get an EV when they start using iron ore from northern Minnesota. I said, well, they might actually be already using it, so we'll see. We're going to talk about EV charging infrastructure. Charging, of course, is everywhere. 85-95% of EV charging happens at home in your garage, but it's really moving into a work and a lifestyle environment. Get your Taco Bell while you get some electrons. Get your Starbucks while you get some electrons. Make your Target run while you get some electrons. Things are shifting there. We're seeing city public parking ramps offering free EV charging to get your tax shopping dollars. And on the software side, there's a lot changing there too. We're seeing the magic of the Tesla charging network called Plug and Charge, which has become ISO 15118, which is basically, think of it like plugging in a lamp. When you plug the cable into the wall, the light lights, right? We're starting to see that software being rolled out to basically every charger out there. And so the charger becomes smart to talk to the CPU on the battery and on the car. And basically all the computers talk to each other up to the cloud, and it says, oh, we know this car, there's a credit card on file, we'll debit that. And it gets rid of the screens, it gets rid of all the interaction in the apps. It's just plug in and it turns on and does it automatically. So that's been a big feature that a lot of people have asked for, and they think that they have that because that's out there, but it's only in certain chargers and certain vertical software stacks that align. Level 2 charging or slow charging overnight, we're starting to see curbside third parties making money with charging. The very first curbside chargers have been installed in New York and San Francisco now. Of course, this is how they do it in Europe and Amsterdam and other places, very common. It's also important to note that the city could become a curbside charging vendor as well. So you think about how, you know, the parking meters have gone digital from picking up coins, you know, now it's just all on an app. Well, what if the city put in, you know, the city of Minneapolis put in 10,000 curbside charging stations for overnight charging? Could do that and make money at it, right? Fast charging, DC fast charging is doubling. In the last 5 years, we've seen the number of places to charge double. What if that happens again, right? We could have a lot more charging. Wireless charging could happen. In parking spots for sure. We're now seeing at very early, you know, testing pilots in Europe in roadway, built-in roadway charging while you drive down the road. Live crowdsourcing of EV navigation and charging information. We're seeing the speed of the cars talking to each other, the people talking to each other. Again, this is very normal in some charging scenarios, but we're starting to see, you know, people that in the old days, there used to be a sign that said burritos on sale 100 feet down this, you know, down this place away from the charger. And now we're starting to see that show up in the apps and in the screens. What are we going to do with all the gas stations once we convert them over to EV stations? And here's a test for you. You can have your opinion on this. Are there more places to charge an EV in California than there are gas stations? We'll talk about that. Gas car sales dropped off in 2017. We're already in the decline of the gas car. How fast will it decline? How far will things go before the tipping point happens? Swappable batteries. This is a thing that took off, but then it didn't take off. But it is a thing in China. They do swap out batteries physically from underneath the vehicle. And we're starting to see semis swap out batteries in China 100 seconds from the time the truck moves in. So think of a car wash where you drive in and they drop the battery pack, it drives forward, another battery pack comes up underneath it, 100 seconds to drive away with, you know, so 400 kilowatt hours of battery or whatever in your semi. All right, let's talk about the climate a little bit. So in 2024, there were 27 $1 billion disasters. We know that there are going to be a lot more. That's why the insurance rates are going up, and you can't get insurance for some places in Florida. I have personal friends that have gone through that, being hit by hurricanes twice. They moved out of their house because they can't get insurance for it anymore. So will we have $50 billion in the next 10 years? Who knows? Minnesota air pollution, Canada wildfires, things like that. Talk about all the climate stuff. I've got 3 or 4 slides on that. What if and how fast will that come? On the EV policies and regulation, think about the Minnesota EV goal is 20% of new car sales by 2030. We're at 6.7% of new car sales at the end of 2024. Will we make it? It's a good question. It's a pretty steep curve. We'll talk about that. Excel in Colorado is focusing on virtual power plants. Will we have virtual power plants here in Minnesota? Basically, the idea that you will have batteries in your garage, and at certain times you will disconnect from the grid and run off of batteries, right? Or provide power back to the grid instead of a live flow to you. Maybe the live flow of electrons will be back to the grid. Good question there. Talking about clean electrical grid, we're at 51% of energy right now in Minnesota is from carbon-free sources and nuclear. So what happens over the next 10, 15 years? Our goal is 100% by 2040. And there's a couple interesting statistics. I'll talk about that. We just had a major milestone here in March, and I have a slide on that. Will we have zero emission zones in Minnesota? They are pretty prevalent around the world in the biggest cities like London and Beijing, Shanghai, LA has them, of course. But these are zero emission zones where you cannot drive a car or a diesel truck. It has to be electric or zero emission certified or pay the fine. I will tell you that I knew about those, but I had a major wake up call. About a year ago, I was in Amsterdam and I was standing in the middle of Amsterdam, one of the largest cities in the world, and I could smell fresh flowers. It was unbelievable to me. And I started looking into these zero emission zones and where they're at. You'll be surprised, there's 340 cities around the world that have some kind of restrictions on that. EV marketplace manufacturing, the rest of the world is going to EVs, but not so much in the United States. Canada's at, we'll see where they go, but China's at 51%. Europe is roughly around 20 to 25%. We're at 10% in North America, approximately. Most of those, maybe 30 some percent of those are in California, mostly the clean 11 to 15 clean car states. Mostly blue states, mostly urban. So we'll see if things break out of that cycle. How many of the top 10 best-selling vehicles offer an EV version today? I had this question recently, and I dug into it a little bit, and I have the top 10, and I have a note to myself to do the top 25 when I get around to it. We're certainly going to talk about EVs as free cars, meaning if it's under $30,000, that is basically a free car these days because you could put $30,000 worth of gas and maintenance into a gas car over the 12, 13 years that the average person keeps it. So will people start driving EVs because you could buy the car, drive it with electricity, and maintain it for that price? Used EVs are an incredible value. We're seeing cars that are $5,000 or $10,000. Some of those old Nissan Leafs that still go 50 or 100 miles, certainly more than enough for a lot of first-time drivers, students that commute, things like that. The Chevy Bolt, some of the early ones of those are in maybe the $10,000 to $15,000, $20,000 range. And we're going to have a lot of Teslas coming into that space. They're already starting to drop into the $25,000 range. EVs, where will they be made? That's a good question. I mean, what if right now China is shipping over 1 million EVs outside of their country every year? What happens? And they're going everywhere. Except the USA, of course. They're going to Brazil. They're going to Australia. They're going to Japan. They're going all over, and to the UK, by the way. So, will we make EVs on the continent that people buy them in? Is a good question. What are we going to do about that? All right. Full self-driving is coming on super fast. I don't think people are fully aware of that. We've been talking about Waymo and that whole thing. They're now at 20 million rides is where they're at. So 20 million trips in a driverless car. We'll get into that in detail. And I just had this recently through a bike friend of mine. I was complaining to him that my bike, I wanted to get a second battery so I could ride really far. And he said, well, and my bike is 3 years old and it's electric. I have about 1,000 miles on it. And he said, well, the new battery or the new bikes, if I were to get a new one, would be about 70 miles on a battery. And he said very easily into the 120 mile range in the next 2 to 3 years. So I was thinking, well, what if I got one of those bikes? I could ride it, pretty much all week if I wanted to. We're starting to see delivery vans and especially school buses connecting back to the grid through vehicle to grid. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for things to happen. We've seen some of the school bus programs come back very positive to be used as, grid assets in the summer when they're not hauling kids around. And then my last fun one is the EV vertical takeoff and landing of air taxis. Maybe we should have an air taxi that would haul a pilot, 4 people, and suitcases from Minneapolis down to Mayo. Every 30 minutes, they could leave from the airport. What do you think of that idea? All right. So this picture, when you see the little orange car with the plug, it's time to take a drink, time to go for a stretch. We're going to take a minute break and then get back into it, okay?
Okay.
All right. Are we ready to keep going? All right. So I'm going to jump into the normal, what I call my normal 20, 25-minute TED Talk here that I've been doing for the last 10, 12 years. It's kind of like one of those toys where you pull the string and they just start talking and go. Um, so welcome to EVs. My name's Alan. I've been driving an electric car for 12 years, a couple 100,000 miles, all electric, no gas, no maintenance, or nearly all, no maintenance. I would say that the progress is unstoppable. The outcome is inevitable. Welcome to the electric decade. So let's start with this little fun story here of the blue car. I call this Emery's Blue Bolt. So how this started was a few years ago. Emery's mom and dad came to a presentation of mine, and they were looking for a used car to commute from Southern Apple Valley to the University of Minnesota, about 36 miles round trip. And the old Subaru had to go. That was the comment. And so there was somebody in the audience that just happened to be selling them. I knew the guy's name. His name is Roger. And so they ended up buying Roger's Bolt, $20,000, 2022 Chevy Bolt. And I had them back a few months later and it kind of was like, how's it going? And they're like, oh, it's great. We love it. It's wonderful. And that's when Emery gave me this picture as a thank you. And I was touched, needless to say. A 6-year-old made this picture for me. And it was the same age as my grandson. And Emery is not my grandson, by the way, or not related to me. But anyway, I think Emery did a really nice job. She put a lot of nice stars on it. The car is at a fast charger at the Walmart, by the way. If you don't know what that charger looks like, it's an Electrify America charger. So I had the parents on, and they did a really nice job of talking about the EV. But the star of the show was Emery. Very much like Art Linkletter and kind of Paul Harvey, the rest of the story came out. So I said, Emery, how do you like the little blue car? Well, it's really fun because Mom likes to drag race with it sometimes with the people next to the stoplight. And I said, oh, really? Oh, Mom says we have the fastest car now and we can beat anybody when we need to. And I said, well, that's kind of fun. She said, it's kind of like a roller coaster sometimes when Mom really gets excited and takes off. And I said, okay. And I'm like, oh boy, this is getting out of control. And then I said, well, how does Dad feel about the car? Oh, Mom and Dad fight up over who gets to drive the fun car and who has to drive the stinky Subaru. And I said, oh, really? Dad says we're saving a lot of money and I get to go to Disneyland because we're saving thousands of dollars a year. I look over at Dad and he's like, $2,000 a year is what we're saving. $6,000 to go to Disneyland. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I said, well, Emery, do you think that you will drive this car someday? And she said, oh, yeah, I plug it in and unplug it every day. It's my job to keep it charged up. And I said, oh, very nice. And she says, and I said something like, well, do you think that it'll be around in 10 years? And she said, oh, yeah, we love the car. We're taking really good care of it. And I said, oh, and I said, do you ride it in a lot? And she said, only every day, unless we go to Grandma's house far away in Wisconsin. Then we have to ride on the old stinky Subaru. And then I said, okay. And she said, Mom said cars shouldn't smoke and neither should people. And I said, okay, well, thank you, Emery. I'm going to use that story for a long time when I do my EV presentation, because that's pretty much the entire summary right there. $20,000, fantastic ROI. They're charging it overnight on the Dakota Electric program for 6 cents, per kilowatt hour. So it's by far under 50 cents a day for them to make the commute. It's quite a fantastic story. So let's talk about this fun picture. I think David mentioned earlier that you guys know a little bit about Tony Siva and have talked about him. So this is one of his presentation slides. Easter parades, New York City in the year 1900. On the left-hand side, can you find the one motor vehicle? I put a red circle around it just to help you out of all those horse and buggies. And 13 years later, can you find the one horse and buggy among all of those cars 13 years later? I would tell you that we are at the beginning of a major generational change. The automobile industry is 125 years old, and things are shifting very rapidly. One of the best electric cars was this car I saw at the State Fair in 2018. It was from the early 1900s, manufactured even before that. And it was quite interesting because this was the year that my Tesla, my red Tesla, was one of the very first red Teslas in North America. VIN number under 7,000, was featured at the Minnesota State Fair in the Eco Exchange building. Kind of a crazy situation how that all happened. But it was kind of, for me, a moment to kind of pinch myself that this Model 3 that you're looking at right here was also at the fair a few doors down from my Model 3 in the Eco Exchange building. Just one more old picture to point out that we did have electric cars here in Minnesota before the 1900s. 38% of American cars were electric in the 1900s. So the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. I use this slide quite frequently to talk about the adoption of EVs. It's just another technology coming through people's lives, like cell phones and party lines that have switched over, mainframes to PCs to cell phones, things like that. So in the upper left-hand corner, the #1 selling car on the face of the earth, not EV, but the #1 selling car on the face of the earth is an EV. This is a BYD Seal or a Dolphin. Not sure exactly which one it is in the picture. This is $12,000 in China, $22,000 in Europe, not available in the United States. I did drive this car in Puerto Vallarta about 8-9 months ago, and I will tell you that it was on sale there for $15,300. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, this is a hell of a car for $15,000. Was not exactly what I would call as North Americanized as, you know, like a Toyota or Camry or something like that. But at that price point, at 3x less, it's phenomenal. It's a world beater car, no doubt. There's a reason why that car is #1 in the world. #1 used to be the Tesla Model Y. Things have shifted there quite quickly with the lack of sales. In the upper right-hand corner, we have the Chevy electric pickup. This is 440 miles, and we'll get into that, why this is important. 1 out of every 5 vehicles on the road in North America is a pickup truck. And things are shifting in that space as well. Maybe you've had an electric garbage truck come down your street and pick up the trash recently. I'm sure by now you've had an Amazon delivery with one of their electric delivery vans. Maybe you're lucky and have one of your children or grandchildren riding the electric school buses. We have 15 of those in Minnesota. We have another 32 on order. And we now have crazy things like electric semis that go from Munich down up over the Alps and down into Italy, fully loaded electric semis at 80,000 pounds equivalent. Just a few of the things. We have electric boats, electric airplanes, electric bicycles, electric 2-wheelers, electric 3-wheelers. Everything is basically going electric because in the bottom right-hand corner here, you can see the reason. Over the last 30 years, the battery cost per kilowatt hour of energy cost has dropped 99% and still dropping. And we'll get into that in detail. At the same time, the energy density went up by 5x. That is a major technology change that is driving and allowing all of this to happen. So let's make sure we're on the same page. What is an electric vehicle? We have gas cars, we have hybrid cars. If it doesn't have a plug, it's a gas car. That's the way to think about it because all the energy is coming from gas. If you can't plug it in, not a car of the future. Simple as that. No plug, no deal is what we say in the Minnesota EV group. So it's the plug that brings the magic and saves you the money because you can buy very low cost electricity from the electricity grid overnight, less than 50 cents a gallon equivalent if you're on the right program. So you have to think about how you can use that very efficient electric motor, which is at 95% versus that gas motor at 35%, right? So we have plug-in hybrids and we have full battery electrics. Both of those are considered an EV. EV as an electric vehicle. So it is important to note that a gas car can have an electric motor with a battery. Okay?
Well, is that enough to start?
Yeah.
To do
Can we
one.
mute that, please? Thank
Please.
you.
Please mute.
Well, I thought we had it out last year and then couldn't do it because of the weather.
I see. Okay, good.
I'm still gonna go and get some.
Dan, can you mute everybody, please?
Mhm.
And I'm gonna have to go and get a paint scraper. I know what I want.
Well, if you tell me what it is, I'll pick it up. Can you
Dan,
send-
Warren,
yeah.
Warren looks like he's muted, but
My
he's still
phone?
coming through.
Okay, well,
We can hear you. Are you going to present or am I? Thank you. All right, let's talk about EV market statistics. So this is the one slide I used to talk about worldwide numbers. And I will tell you that most people in the US have no understanding of just how fast the EVs are being adopted outside of North America. On the left-hand side, you can see the numbers. China is the red, green is Europe, and North America is the blue. These are the three largest EV markets in the world today. I would tell you that China is shipping a lot of EVs to the rest of the world, and the numbers are going to change very quickly in the next 5 years. Worldwide, 20%, 1 out of every 5 cars sold in 2023 was an electric vehicle. The United States is nowhere near that number, just to be clear. In 2023, or 2024, sorry, 22%. The forecast on the worldwide level is 27%. And by 2030, 1 out of every 3 cars on the global market will be electric. China is currently at 51% of new car sales. Europe approximately 25% if you average things out a little bit. Germany has been up and down between 25 and 35% approximately. France is around 26%. And you know from Super Bowl commercials a few years ago that the Nordic countries are at 75, 85, 95%. I think in the first quarter of 2025, the Norway number was 97.6% of new car sales were electric. Here in the United States, in 2024, we're at about 10%. The forecast is now down to 13%, the new revised number based on the current administration's love of EVs. California has the vast majority of EVs in North America, 35%. California is very much like Europe. If you want to think about what's going on in California, that's kind of where the bar is in Europe. Both have banned the gas car sale as of 2035. Obviously, there's been a lot of pushback on both fronts, both places, but that's kind of where the bar is at the worldwide level. Things have shifted, obviously, in the last week here, but we'll see what actually comes out in the real world over the next few months. Pew Research says 3 out of 10 Americans, about 32%, would strongly consider an EV for their next vehicle. That number has not changed since June of 2024 when that was out. It's actually very variable in North America where people are. More urban, less rural for EV purchases. More Democrat than Republican. More women than men. More younger than older. But you can look at the numbers very clearly and see where things are at. USA forecast 33% by 2030. And the number you're probably most interested in is where are we at in Minnesota? 6.7% EV sales at the end of 2024. 2.3% currently on the road. And we have about 5.5 million cars, basically 1 car for every person between the age of 18 and 65. All right, why would you want to drive an EV? Well, people like to save money, save the earth, and have a good driving experience. You can dramatically save money when it comes to driving an EV. You can drive 15,000 miles for $150 to $250. That would be the overnight low-cost electric program where you're putting in 45-cent gallons of gasoline equivalent. Save the earth is a big part of it for some people. Transportation is the #1 source of climate-causing pollution in Minnesota and the United States, and some people are working to do something about that. Kind of like Emory's Blue Bolt. Mom and Dad both wanted to send that message to Emory, and people definitely have this as a part of their EV story. You can have an EV with a zero emission tailpipe because it doesn't have a tailpipe, and you can run at 65 to 95% if you use clean energy. It's important to point out here that it does take energy, obviously, to make the vehicle, but it is the lifetime operating of the vehicle that really matters. The average vehicle lasts 12.6 years and months, and it's that operating life cycle that really matters. Even if you were to use a coal-powered electricity plant, the EV would still run at 51% cleaner than a gas car. So it's a pretty big difference. The Minnesota grid is at 51% carbon-free today, going to 100% by 2040. And since a couple of you people are from Iowa, I just wanted to throw in here, about a month and a half ago, I was challenged. Somebody said, is it true that Iowa got 61% of their electricity in 2023 from wind power only? And at the time, I said I didn't think that was possible, that one energy source would provide that high of a level, because usually it takes a number of different sources. I went back and looked it up. It's true. 61% of the energy in Iowa came from wind turbines alone. Okay, EVs offer a wonderful driving experience. Smooth, fast, powerful, quiet, a fun drive. We frequently hear these kind of words when people take a test drive. And I would tell you the creature comforts are huge. People love to wake up to a charged vehicle every morning with 200 and 300 miles of range and not going to the gas station, especially women. They absolutely love this. I've actually had women clap after making that comment in live presentations. Let's talk about EV charging real quickly here. 85% of EV charging happens overnight in your garage where your car is parked. So here I have 6 different charging scenarios to kind of give you an idea of how that works. Upper left-hand corner on your screen is a single family home. That's my garage, my Tesla wall unit right there next to my grandson and I's fluorescent sled, which has kind of turned into an antique. We don't use that much anymore because we haven't had snow for the last 2 winters in Minnesota. Maybe we should be thinking about that. Second slide, or second picture over, is an example of putting electric car charging into a condominium or an apartment, where we bring the charger to the parking spot and put software in place so that we can charge the individual car and put the fee in place and pay back the electricity for the building. Third picture across the top is the idea of a commercial garage where you have public available parking. This one just happens to be a charge point at the 50th in France in Edina store that I went to a couple months ago. And then in the right-hand picture here, this is a picture that I took halfway back from Florida. I stopped in Paducah, Kentucky at a hotel, and they had this level 2 charger, and I plugged into it overnight. And that's a great example of lifestyle charging at its best, where we start to see things move away from the gas station. Remember, EVs don't go to the gas station. They get their charge wherever they park overnight. Bottom 2 pictures are fast charging, basically getting up to from 0, or let's say 10 or 15% up to 80% in 15 to 20, maybe even 30 minutes, depending upon your car, your charging, what you plug into. There's over 50,000 places to charge right now. The left one is Tesla. The green and white one is Electrify America. We have 7 major charging networks with another one coming. We'll talk about Iona later in the presentation. All right, how far can you go in one charge? This is a very common question. It's actually one of the top 3 questions that people ask that do not drive an EV. So we need to talk about this. EV range is between 100 and 500 miles in the battery today. Average range in Minnesota is about 295 miles. And I point that out to you just because there's a vast difference between what people think they need and what they actually need. So cars have basically cell phones built into them. We call that telematics, and we can figure out where cars go, how far they go, how fast they go, things like that. The average American drives 36 miles per day. And this is an amazing stat. 28% of trips are under 1 mile. Highly suggest looking into a bicycle for those 28% of the trips. 90% of all trips are less than 100 miles. And this is an absolute mind-blowing statistic. 50% of Americans only drive over 150 miles 4 times a year. And they don't think that a car that has 300 miles of range is enough for them to drive. That's where people are at when you ask them to do the research numbers. So I ask people, if you started with a full tank in the morning, how many days out of the year do you drive and empty the tank and need to fill again? Because roughly a tank of gas is about the same as it is for an EV. 25 miles, that's the average miles per gallon for a gas car. Average gas tank is about 14. So about the same as you would go in an EV battery car these days. So EVs can do cross-country trips. I would tell you that EVs today there's no time to really wait because the human needs are faster than the EV time to charge. I give you the example here of me going to Chicago. I do this quite often. 19 minutes from Minneapolis to downtown Chicago. That's a pretty normal trip, I would say. And frankly, I need to stop at least 1, 2, or 3 times, depending upon what time of the day I'm going. But that is a representative trip. And I think if you were to divide out a long distance trip into 2 or 3 hours, you're probably going to stop for a snack or coffee or restroom break or something like that, or just to get out and stretch. That's when the car goes, right? So I always say, when you eat and you rest, the car eats and rests. And they're pretty much in sync these days when it comes to long distance road trips. All right, what about winter driving? Well, the first thing I would say is when people say EVs don't work in the winter, I love that. And I say, well, that's interesting because Scandinavian countries like Norway, which is like Minnesota from a lot of perspectives, is over 95% EVs. So if it doesn't work, how do those 5.5 million people get around in Norway, right? It's kind of interesting to think about how our new DNA hasn't learned from our old DNA. I particularly come from Luxembourg, Germany, but I know there's a lot of people in Minnesota that have very strong ties back to Scandinavian countries from several generations looking back. So why is it in Minnesota that your DNA can't use an EV, but your old DNA seems to be able to make that work? I'll let you think about that. So average Minnesota EV battery, it says 275 here. The new numbers just came out. I didn't update this slide. It's high 200s because it's blended down because of the plug-in hybrids, which are usually 20, 30, 40 mile batteries. But most EVs are over 300, maybe 350, I would say, for most of the modern ones. And I tell people in the winter, you just keep the heater running all the time. Keep the heat pump running. 80-degree Caribbean breeze, because you're just not going to go very far in January when it's cold or in February. Some people do. Most people do not. Just warm the car before you leave, keep it on all the time, and enjoy. So key point to understand is people say, well, Alan, they don't work in Minnesota winters because it's cold. And I say, well, they do work. It's an efficiency education conversation, really. So it could be from 0, let's say above 32, not much loss. Between 0 and 32, maybe 20% loss. If it's below 0, and I've done this trip a couple times now, you might look at a 30% loss of range in the battery. But that just means you're going to charge one extra stop. And I can assure you if it's below 0, you're probably not going far and you're probably going to stop anyway, because it's going to be kind of a crazy trip to be driving a long distance, more than 300 miles in January. All right, so equal good traction from all 4 tires. So we talked about the old BMW strategy of the driving machine has come to the EV world. 51-49 balance because the battery sits between all 4 wheels down low in the car. And of course, you can pre-warm the car and keep it warming and things like that. I just wanted to point out this is a real picture. I did drive that car after digging that car out of the snowdrift, and you probably remember that day. But that is a real picture. And you can notice that in the time it took me to get enough snow off of the car that to get inside of it, to run it, that the window was already starting to defrost. Super fast heat in an electric car, and it's very different than waiting, a mile down the road for the gas engine to warm up. I also want to point out that we have had electric cars drive from the North Pole to the South Pole, and it worked just fine in the cold. All right. The other major question that people ask besides how far do they go is how much do they cost? EV cost today is somewhere, if you use a used one, could be $8, $10, $20,000. New ones are $120,000, somewhere in there. We have over 100 plus models to choose from in North America. If you go back 5 years, 6 years, we had about 45 cars. So things have shifted very dramatically. If you want to get a list of those, I've got that slide coming up as well. Back in February of 2025, the average new car price, not EV price, but the average new car price was just under $50,000. It's kind of bouncing at about 48 this month right now. But what we're seeing is that EVs are lower cost. Some models are lower cost than the average. Some of the leading models, particularly Tesla Model Y, is below the cost of the average gas car out there. So we have shifted from EVs, the uber rich, $100,000 EVs, to Uber drivers. And I always have to tell this story. I was in Chicago a few months ago, and I got picked up by an Uber driver early in the morning. I was out drinking at a bar, and I made a comment. I said, the car looks brand new. And she said, oh, we just got it a month ago. We used to have a Tesla Model Y. And I said, oh, well, how far did you drive it? And she said, we put 100,000 miles on in 13 months. And I was like, well, that can't be true. I pulled out my phone. I wasn't I could make the calculation work on the phone. I wasn't that drunk. And I said, so you drove like 295 miles every day for 13 months? And she said, yep. 3 of us drive Uber, my sister-in-law and my brother. And we basically drive the car 24/7 whenever we need to go. And that's how we did 100,000 miles in 13 months. And I said, well, what kind of maintenance did you have? And she said, we put snow tires on in the winter and we changed the cabin air filter. And she said, a couple other things, but they were like small, dings and things like that, but we didn't fix them. And I said, wow, that's a pretty amazing story. And she said, yeah, we bought another EV. She was driving a Kia EV6 at the time. And I was pretty keen on looking at that car because a friend of mine bought that car. And I said, well, why'd you buy this one? She said, longer range, better battery. That's what we did. That's how we pick them. And I said, okay. So it's important to point out here that window sticker price is very different than the total cost to own. And that's what total cost of ownership is really about. And we're seeing from total cost of ownership here that this really shifted back in 2019, where we got into what I started to see here and started to talk about as EVs that became free cars compared to gas cars. It depends upon what the cars are, but that's becoming more and more of a reality where the cost to drive a gas car is completely, it's higher because you have to buy the gas and the maintenance than buying an EV. And I think that Uber story really points that out, 100,000 miles in 13 months with little or no maintenance. And they charged overnight at home and only supercharged when they got really super busy. And I thought that was quite an interesting story. All right, I have to talk about trucks a little bit because as I mentioned earlier, 1 out of every 5 vehicles on the road in North America is a pickup truck. 1 out of every 20 passenger vehicles in North America is a Ford F-150. And we do now have electric pickup trucks shipping in volume, which is a big deal. We didn't have them for a long time because batteries are expensive, right? So as battery prices drop, you can have bigger batteries or lower price batteries. And we're going to see that with cars going forward as well. So top left is the Ford F-150 Lightning, Chevy Silverado, and the Rivian, which is the blue one here. And the same company that makes Rivian also provides Amazon with their electric delivery vans. So they actually have a fair bit of experience. A lot of people love their Rivian pickups. It's become kind of a cult truck. And I talk about it, and I think it's an amazing vehicle. I've ridden in it and driven it, and it's been really good. Also, we have the Tesla Cybertruck down here at the bottom. And I should point out that the Motor Trend SUV of the year in 2024 was the Blazer EV from Chevy. This was, and the reason I put it on here is because it really came from out of nowhere and came one of the top 5 vehicles. And it was quite quickly how it rose. So it's been a hot selling vehicle. And that is a vehicle that has batteries made in the United States. All right, let's talk about batteries. And then we're going to be done and start switching into futurist conversations. So how long do EV batteries last? How much do they cost? And what about recycling? So I talked about this earlier, but I want to mention it again. Over the past 30 years, costs have fallen 99%, while the stored energy has gone up by 5x. We see batteries now lasting the life of the car. We don't switch out the batteries. You can unbolt the battery pack and drop it, but it's not what we do on a regular basis. The warranty for batteries is 8 years, 100,000 miles, pretty much like the rest of the major drivetrain components. And it's important to understand how batteries wear out. This isn't like the flashlight in your junk drawer, right? So they degrade a little bit every time you charge over the years. So we have about 1 to 2% average degradation per year of how far it would charge up to. So if you took a 363-mile car, after 15 years, it would still be over 300 miles. And we're seeing that prove out from some of the earlier vehicles that have been shipping for over 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Recycling companies have ramped up. New batteries are being made from only old batteries, leading to a circular battery economy. Just like lead acid batteries are 98% recycled in the gas cars out there today. So it's important to understand we're going to have a circular economy around batteries. CATL, which is the largest battery company out of China, their new EV battery says that they can charge as fast as you can pump gas. And they're expecting that battery to be commercially available in large quantities in 2026. All right, so that's what I have for you in the EV presentation today. So share the good news on EVs with people you know, or connect me to them. I would love to talk to them about that. Go drive some electric cars. They are clean, convenient, fun. And call Excel. That is your new gas station, controlled by your Public Utility Commission. And I would say save some money, save the earth, and have fun driving an EV. All right, that is the normal presentation. Do we have questions on any of that? Or
There's
should we
one-
move into the futurist questions?
There's one hand right now,
What is it?
which is mine.
Okay.
I think I just read an article, it might have been in the newspaper, about, you mentioned condos installing EV charging stations.
That's
this
my
was
specialty, yes.
This was about how it's many condos and so forth don't have the infrastructure to handle that electrical power volume, and they're finding it very expensive to do. So I'm wondering if that's going to be a limiting factor in how people can use that.
Well, you've talked to the right guy. So if you go to a website called ezgoev.com, that's my website. I focus on electric car charging for condominiums and apartments. It is a challenge because, well, there's a lot of reasons. Infrastructure, buildings are not built to bring power to individual parking spots. It is definitely doable. If you go to, I can send you a link later on, but I've done some of the larger projects here in the Twin Cities as a consultant to them. It's about $3,500 ballpark number to bring the wire to that spot. And it's about $53, a little over $5,000 to bring the whole thing to the parking spot. Why is it so expensive compared to a couple $1,000s or maybe even a couple $100s in a single family environment? Because you have to really manage the power, and it's a lot cheaper to put in smart chargers and have them talk to each other and do load balancing and moving power around the garage. So there's a lot there to unpack. The biggest challenge is building's not ready. You're dealing with a homeowner association and people that don't want to spend money as a group. So you have to basically put in the chargers where they want to put them. And so it's common infrastructure that needs to be installed to make it work, right? I could spend literally, I have 400 slides, 150 of my slides are on that particular topic, Tom. So it's a challenge. The solutions are there. It definitely works. You can still, save a lot of money driving electric. The cost payback is longer, obviously. But if you take $2,000 a year in gas, the average family spends $2,775 a year in gas. If you take a couple $1,000s and you're going to have to spend you know, 2, 3, 4 years to pay back the infrastructure. So it still works. It's just a longer ROI. And I'd like to point out there that when you're putting in wiring and transformers and breaker panels and things like that, the infrastructure, that's going to last 50 to 100 years. I mean, it's kind of a one-time drop, right? It's not something that wears out. The charger may change, but the wiring and the manual labor and things like that, it's a lot of parking garages. You have to get scaffolding and roll around inside of them. It's a challenge. So, but anyway, let's keep moving here. I think that you guys.
Just to continue, so they have to find some way to spread out the cost of that. So the people who are currently there don't bear the full cost, I would think.
Well, that becomes the topic of discussion. Is it a building upgrade? We wouldn't be doing the building upgrade if we weren't upgrading for the EVs. So should the EV owner pay? Should the overall building pay? Even if it's 50 to 100-year infrastructure. Some people are like, nope, not paying, not going there, not doing it. And other buildings are like, well, we're going to need this sooner or later. It's just like kind of like, you know, roof, you know, new garage floor, whatever. Depends upon how you want to allocate those costs. Either way, it has to be done if you want to do it. So that's why you have people that get an EV and go to what I call the electronic gas station. In other words, they go to the Tesla supercharger, they go to Walmart and plug into the Electrify America charger because they don't have charging available in their apartment or their condo. And it's a challenge. It's a people challenge. It's not a technology challenge. So, but yeah, like I said, I could spend 6 hours talking about that topic because I do it every week pretty much. So, all right, let's keep moving.
Warren is next. We have
Yeah,
three
I'm
more
next,
hands.
and I own a condo in Winnipeg. They're having that discussion right now. It is a real issue for them, and the problem is no one wants to pay for it.
Right.
But on the slide you had, it showed the decreasing cost of batteries to 99%. Does that mean a $100 battery costs $1 today?
It means that the unit of energy, the cost to store that 1 unit of energy has decreased by 99%. I'm going to go into that with more slides.
Okay, thank you.
Carol.
Yeah. And at the same time, that energy unit size has gone up by 5x. So if you bought a Tesla in 2012, that was basically a $100,000 car, and it was approximately a 75 kilowatt hour battery, right? Today, that would be $40,000 car, roughly speaking. Battery. Let's use cars' sizes have changed, but roughly. But the price of batteries is dropping so fast. I'm going to go into that because it's what the magic is that makes everything happen, allowing it to go to electric, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay,
all right.
Carol, we have three more hands.
All
Carol,
right, more hands.
let's make it quick.
Okay, I live in the city of St. Paul.
Uh-huh.
And the one thing I have noticed that's bad about this is that all of the curbside charging stations that I have seen installed over the last, say, 5 years are converted from handicapped parking.
Sometimes that happens. Yep. There's a lot there. I'm going to get into that. It's called the Spot Charging Network. So the city of St. Paul got money from the Federal Department of Transportation to do a study. And I think they put in like, was it 35 charging places, basically to power the EV program, the Spot Car program. And it's research. It's a research pilot project. And a lot of places, they used the handicap parking spot because it was the only place in that area to get a parking spot, to get electricity to it. But that has changed going forward. And we're starting to see what I would call a European best practice coming to North America. In New York and San Francisco, they're putting in curbside parking where the person that owns the building can put in charging in front of their building. Which makes third party, and it can be profitable. So people are going to be incentivized to do it. But Yes, there have been a lot of things that have changed over the years going forward. But I hear you, Carol. That did happen in some spots. It happened in Minneapolis too, and they got a lot of feedback about that.
Yeah. Oh, then I have a question.
Okay.
That was my comment. This is my.
Yes, that's true. It is unfortunate that did happen.
Is there any research going on having solar panels on the roof of the car?
Yeah, that's a common question. The energy density coming off of the solar on the roof does not power the car. It can power, like, to keep the car cool, to like run a fan or something like that. There has been a lot of research done with, like university projects, and there's the DARPA project. There's actually projects out there where they race electric cars with only the energy from the solar panels on the car. But those are more research cars out there. It doesn't work with, quote unquote, crash-worthy vehicles that require a lot more energy to move. The energy density coming off the space of the car is not high enough today.
Yeah. H-Town.
In my youth, I spent too many hours filling 2 1-gallon cans of gas and driving out somewhere and filling a buddy's car so he could continue to drive.
Mhm.
How do you do that with an electric?
So this is a common question.
I mean, the gas in the electric going to the gas car is easy, but he's got an electric car.
Yeah. Well, electricity is pretty much everywhere that humans are. So that's one thing I would say. We have more plugs on the face of the earth than pretty much anything else. So it's a great way to move energy around. People often ask this question and they frame it as, what if I run out of charge on my car? Like I drove down the freeway today and I saw a tow truck bring a gallon of gas to a car that was stopped alongside of the road. How do you do that in the electric world? That's the way the question is usually phrased. So AAA has what they call jump trucks with jump chargers in them. So they basically bring a pickup truck with a generator on the back, and they plug it into your car. And during the 5 minutes it takes to run all your credit card information and all that, they give you 5 to 10 miles in your battery, and you drive off to a supercharger and you fill up. Okay. The other thing I tell people is, you don't usually run out in the middle of nowhere. You run out in that last mile before you get to the charger. The reality is people just don't run out. There is way more information coming back to the driver in an electric car than there is in a gas car. And I'll actually get into that. I have actually screenshots that I can show you, because people have been told, you're going to run out. You're going to run out. And I say, well, if you don't run out in a gas car, you're not going to run out in an electric car. And the reality is, you're just going to pull off to the side of the road and either get a jump, get a tow, or more likely give the guy wherever you're parked $20 and plug into his garage overnight, take an Uber home, come back the next morning, and everything will be fine.
Okay, last one, Eric.
Did you mention progress toward a universal standard charger?
That is coming up. We are going to talk about that a little bit. Everyone is moving to the same plug. It's called the North America Charging Standard. It is the same look and feel as a Tesla one today, but we are going to be moving. So in Europe, they use CCS. In Asia Pacific, they use CHAdeMO. And in North America, the most by far plugs are the North America Charging Standard plug of Tesla. So everybody is going to consolidate to that plug for fast charging and overnight slow charging. So we're in the transition period right now. So basically, if you have a car and you want to, you can get an adapter that will allow the North America Charging Standard to go in and then plug into your car and to be able to use those chargers. So
and what does it cost to get a charger installed in your house, in a house?
Say that again?
What does it cost now to get a charger installed in a house?
It depends. Anywhere from a couple $100, $500 if you go to Home Depot and do it yourself, maybe $2,500 if you call a master electrician to do it. It's basically the same equipment as an electric dryer or an electric stove. The biggest challenge in older homes is, do you have enough electrical capacity coming into the house overall? A lot of them have 100, 125 amp panels. You see that in condos and apartments as well. But typically a new modern panel would be 200 amps. A lot of people put in a 30 amp outlet, and there's a cable that comes with the car and you just plug into that. So that outlet is like $27 at Home Depot, and then it depends upon how far the wiring is. Usually I figure $2 a foot, and you got to go up, over, and around to go back to the panel. And then it's usually like a $25, $50 breaker. All of that if there's room in the panel. So it depends on a situation. Every one of them is unique. If you need help with that, I've got electrician friends that would be more than happy to give you a number.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So that was the quote unquote normal TED Talk. We're now going to dive into this list again. Now that I've kind of given you a peaking of in priming of the pump and then kind of talked about some of the major topics, now we're going to do the what ifs, right? What if? And we're going to start with batteries because that's the most exciting space. And I know a couple of you asked about this. What's going on with the battery prices? This chart talks about just, most recent, 5 years, 6 years, and projecting it going out to 2030. So what we're seeing now is that we're at about $100 a kilowatt hour for a battery to store energy today. That means a Tesla battery today is about $7,300. It's 73 kilowatt hours of energy, right? We are dropping dramatically. We are going to come down half and half again in the next 5 years. So it's fully expected that we would have $2,000 or $2,000 for a $22,000 battery today. This is why I think we will sell a lot more cars in the future, why we will have 20% of new car sales in Minnesota will be EVs in 5 years. There's a number of small cars coming to the market that would basically be free cars, right? So that's why I started with that Emery's Blue Bolt story up front, because that story is going to be a new car and people are going to say, yeah, we can have one for in town and then just take, the other SUV or whatever whenever we leave town, because the chances of two people leaving is not very often at the same time. And the numbers are just going to be like, why would you not do a free car? That's really what it comes down to. Why it's going to go down in price. This is a key part. The prices for the raw materials, such as lithium, nickel, cobalt, things like that, are dropping. It kind of everybody got excited when the cars took off and they're like, well, where's all the lithium coming from? Where's all the cobalt coming from? Two things. One is the chemistries have switched from the nickel, metal, cobalt into the lithium batteries. And now the lithium is starting to come into the solid state batteries. So the volume has gone up and the costs have come down. That's really the bottom line. Let's talk a little bit about the solid state batteries, because you guys wanted to talk about the future, and this is the exciting future of batteries. Energy densities are up 2.5 times higher than lithium ion batteries. Charge times are 10 minutes to 80%. Sounds crazy, but true. Designed to last the lifetime of the vehicle with an 8-year warranty, and still holding 90% capacity after 10 years of use. And again, dropping in the battery costs going forward. There's been a lot of talk about this, and I think we're starting to see the research is starting to actually be shipped, quote unquote, in a car on the road. And they're now doing real testing on the road with these batteries to see how they hold up. But solid state batteries are the future of EVs, and we're going to see how real they are. It's kind of been the holy grail coming for, 15, 20 years. The stop off was, something, nickel metal hydride and things like that. Then it was nickel metal cobalt. A lot of different formulas been tested. And if you want a higher density battery, you use lithium, because lithium stores more energy at the electron level. but the solid state is even higher than that. So people ask about battery recycling all the time, and I wanted to just point out that there is a process that works. This was really brought forward with the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law, where some money went into doing research and basically building a couple of factories to do this recycling. And at this point, it does not pencil out to do this because the volume of batteries is so low. I mean, we don't have a lot of electric cars that are worn out yet. That's really the bottom line. There is other lithium batteries to do the testing with, but we have seen new EV batteries from only old EV batteries. And you can take a look at recycling the plastic, recycling the chemicals, recycling, the materials in the batteries. The Argonne National Laboratory is based in Chicago, and they have a fantastic white paper if you want to go read all about that. And the circular battery economy is very much alive. I don't know if you guys know about Redwood Materials or not, but Redwood Materials was started by J.B. Strobel, who was the chief technology officer at Tesla and has moved on. And Redwood Materials basically has perfected this process and is looking for basically anything they can recycle. The company that was in Europe has gone through boom and bust, and now is been bought again at a different price point. But definitely looking forward to recycling batteries from a physical capability. There's a whole other conversation around what they call second life batteries, which is when the battery comes out of an EV, it still might be at 85% or 80%, repurposing those batteries into stationary batteries. And here at the University of Minnesota, St. Thomas connection, they've been stripping battery systems down to just the core batteries and then putting different electronics over the top of them and different software. And they have found some really great uses for those batteries, like they're using them for solar and wind power storage in off-grid marketplaces. So a lot there. This is Northvolt that I mentioned has built new batteries from only old batteries. And so we're going to have to, quote unquote, mine and manufacture to get those original materials. But we forecast, looking out between 10, 20 years, that we will have, like an aluminum can is 82% recycled these days, that we will have recycled EV batteries. And it is much better in the long run to do this kind of a process of recycling the materials over and over. And then I just want to touch on real quickly, the sodium ion batteries are kind of the next holy grail, really going far out. If you remember Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was a fascinating book for me in middle school. Captain Nemo had an electric submarine that was powered by salt batteries, if you remember that. And sodium ion here is the yellow in this chart. And you can see kind of where things are at. Black is lithium iron phosphate. There's a lot of different chemistries there. Nickel metal, the nickel metal, manganese cobalt oxide is that pink line. There was a few batteries, but not a lot of those batteries built. Most of them were very quickly made into lithium because they wanted to go further and go faster. But there's a lot of different chemistries within the lithium family of batteries. But we are starting to already see what's next. And there's some pretty big bets being placed on these sodium ion batteries going forward. All right, so that's the battery section. Time for a drink and questions, and we're going to go to EV charging infrastructure next.
Okay,
Questions?
Carol has her hand up.
Carol, what do you have?
Yes. Okay, with lithium ion batteries, the availability of lithium is the cost.
Mm-hmm.
What is the cost on the solid state batteries?
Much lower. So the difference between a lithium ion battery and a solid state battery is what they call, I'll just use the simple terms, plus and minus side of the battery. In a lithium battery, it's a gel or a liquid between the plus and the minus side of the battery. In a solid state battery, it's a solid divider that allows the electrons to move from one side to the other.
What is the solid divider made of?
I don't know exactly what it's made of, but it's made of a composite material. So I don't know the exact cost. All I know is that the energy density is 2 times higher and the batteries are half the price. So that's why people are excited about them to move from lithium to a solid state battery. But a solid state battery is kind of a generic term for them, kind of like saying it's a lithium battery, right? Lithium has like 25 different chemistries under what we would call a lithium battery. So under a solid state battery, there's, I'm sure, going to be a lot of different tweaking and changing of the things that are there. But I don't know the materials and I don't know specifically what the cost of the components are in a solid state battery. They're just coming out of the labs and just going in the cars.
Okay.
But I could send you some links, Carol, if you want to do a research report and come back to and report back.
Well, yeah.
Maybe so. All right. Any
Okay,
other questions before we move on to charging?
Stan is next.
I know that the Leaf has the CCS and the Chatamo connection.
Yep.
And I think that I guess my question is about vehicle to grid. And what do you think is going to be the possibility of getting that to grow a bit here in the United States? Do you think that they're going to modify the CCS connection so it can do that, or will we just have to have a new connection developed for that?
Yeah. So the whole vehicle to grid is a section I have coming up, but I will try to give you some thoughts on it now.
Anyway.
The challenge is not really in the connections, let's say the wire and, male into female connections and things like that. It's the aggregation from the standards perspective at the software level. So think of it this way. If you're Excel and it's August 12th at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's the highest peak energy you have all year because air conditioners are running, right? That is literally, your whole grid is built to get through that highest peak afternoon, okay? So there's a couple things, and they call them DERMS, Distributed Energy Resource Management Systems. So think of the old saver switch. If you remember that, when you had an air conditioner and you allowed Excel to turn on and off your air conditioner remotely, okay? We also have another example of hot water, heat pumps, hot water heaters. The best case study in the entire United States, possibly one of the best in the world, is with Great River Energy here in Minnesota. They peak up and let fall down the heat in your electric water heater better than almost anybody else that we know of. That's a well-known case study. So why I tell you that is because the control systems, the messaging from, let's say, one big lever at Excel, I need, X amount of energy at 5 o'clock today. Will I have it or not? That ecosystem is not built yet. And technically, the pilots that have been done have been like on military bases, in places like that, where how do we get energy out of the battery? You can get it out, but can you aggregate 100,000 vehicles to give you energy to the grid? And where are the vehicles? And which subsection of the grid are they plugged into? Which lines, which transformers would that flow through? That's the hard part of vehicle to grid. And I've got a slide coming up on that talks about that. So when I get to the Excel Colorado virtual power plant slide, we should bring that up again, because that white paper talks about the whole ecosystem that is not there. And I want to be clear, there are ecosystems that work. For example, in California, Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, has a very strong battery energy to the grid program. We see that also working in Texas, and that's one of the places that Tesla has done a really good job of bringing batteries into the Texas ERCOT marketplace and having the one lever, because it's one software ecosystem. And they have a product called Auto Bidder. If you want to look something up, type in tesla.com Auto Bidder, and you'll see what that does. It's basically an AI engine that looks at where all the batteries are in the homes, the power walls, and then says, oh, you want X amount of energy? We can turn those on and off. but that's in one vertical stack. What we're missing is the macro level above that to say, oh, well, Tesla's got X amount of energy, right? This company's got X amount of energy. The hot water heater program can give us this amount. We could turn off X amount of air conditioners, right? That ecosystem needs to get figured out in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Okay?
Okay.
We'll come back to that.
Tom.
International use. I drive my car up to Canada and put gas in the tank and it works fine. I drive to Mexico.
Yep.
And put gas in the tank.
Yep.
Presumably Teslas are going to have the same connector across the planet, but other connectors.
So the good news is that humans use electricity in all different parts of North America. The connectors can be adapted if they're not the right ones. I have driven my car around Lake Superior on the Circle Tour and gone into Canada, and it works fine. They have electricity. As long as you stay at 60 hertz in North America, you're good. And use an adapter, that works fine. I have a couple different adapters in my car to go from fast to different plugs, but electricity is pretty ubiquitous. Now, if you take your car or my car and we go to Europe, of course that's different. They're at 50 hertz and they have different voltages and things like that.
240 volts. Yeah.
Yeah, it will work if you go into Mexico or Canada.
Thank you.
All right, are we ready to move on to charging?
I guess there was one hand up about 10 minutes ago that dropped off, but I can't remember who that was. So,
all right, let's keep going. So we're going to talk about EV charging now. So there was a question earlier about the reliability of fast charging networks. We are now at 55,000 ports in North America. And this company, Perrin, is basically doing a lot of analytics around what works and what doesn't work. And there's only a couple things I wanted to talk about on here. One is that we're seeing the utilization going up, right? More people, more cars. We're seeing the number of ports, which is like the cable that you can stick into the side of your car, per stop or per location is going up. And there's a couple reasons for that. So in the Tesla world, a lot of the original charging stations were 4, 6, or 8, and now a lot of them are 8, 12, or higher. If you go into Chicago, there's a couple places where there's 40 charging stations for a Tesla at fast chargers, not level 2s. So we're starting to see locations get upgraded in the non-Tesla world as well. Interesting to point out here that we were talking about the North America charging standard, which is basically the Tesla standard today, but we've still seen a lot of CCS chargers being pushed out there, and we would be adapting those over. But we've seen a lot of stations added here. We're now over 55,000 stations. Reliability has gone up. I think the Tesla network is still the gold standard. Yes, at some level, I am a Tesla fanboy driving a Tesla, but I would tell you that everybody would say this in the EV industry, that the gold standard is the Tesla network. They're 5 nines of reliability. They're as reliable as anything else out there in the world these days. So pricing models are real interesting. We'll get into that in a little bit more here, but we are seeing the price of fast chargers going up to be very similar to gas car pricing because it costs a lot of money. It's roughly $1,000 per kilowatt hour. So if you had a 150 kilowatt hour DC fast charger, the unit is $150,000. It's very easy nowadays to have $1 million place where you got several chargers all lined up alongside each other. It's quite expensive to get the cabling. There's only so many places on the electrical grid that can handle and provide that amount of energy. So if you were to take like a 12 port Tesla DC fast charging network, that's about the same amount of electricity as a medium-sized apartment building. So You know, the planning it takes to build an apartment building could be 5 years with the electrical grid. So there's only so many places you can put charging networks or charging spots. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So there was very fast growth across North America with EV charging stations in 2024. Basically, we're up to the ratio now of 1 electron station for every 10 gas stations, which is kind of crazy because 90% or 85% of electric car charging is at home. So basically, the only time that you need the fast charger for the vast majority of people is when you're road tripping. And as you saw earlier, the numbers are pretty stark for that. But we are starting to see here, the green is Tesla. You can just see how much non-Tesla charging has been built out over time, over the last quarters. And this is all due to the Inflation Reduction Act and the money that was coming forward, but has now been turned off until the lawsuits happen. But you can see here where we are in Minnesota, the 3-year change in EV registration. Some of these are kind of silly because, you know, Montana looks like it's had a lot of change, but that's coming off of small numbers, right? But the vast majority of EVs are in California, Texas, and Florida because that's where the most people are, right? But we have had a lot of fast charger locations added and a lot of sites increased that were already there in the number of ports available. So I think we're also seeing retail-led EV charging business models. There's been talk about Starbucks and Target and Walmart, Taco Bell, Whole Foods, 7-Eleven, Subway. Everybody's adding a fast charger or a level 2 charger, mostly fast chargers, to their sites because it's a profitable business to sell gasoline. It's a profitable business to sell electric car charging. And again, it's a lot of convenience. If you can just pull up and, you know, make your Target run, get your, you know, your burrito or whatever, and get a Starbucks and hit the road after 15 or 20 minutes. So we're really moving into more of a lifestyle charging environment, which is similar to gas in some regards, because a lot of convenience stores, you know, 150,000 convenience stores in North America provide gas. They don't make money off of selling the gas. It's like 1, 2, or 3 cents a gallon. The money, the profit is on food from inside and all the Slurpees and hot dogs and things like that with 400% or 500% markup. So gasoline is really the enabler to get you to stop there. Okay. All right. So this is a really, really interesting point. Walmart recently said that they would open in the next 5 years tens of thousands of the fastest chargers available. Walmart has over 5,000 locations in North America. Over 90% of the US population lives within 10 miles of one of its stores. So are we going to have another 30,000 places to charge on top of the 50-some thousand that we have? I mean, it's going to be wild that there will be chargers basically everywhere if Walmart builds that out. And of course, that kind of throws down the, throws it down. It's like, oh, well, Target, you better step up, right? I mean, I have friends that work in the Target charging department at Target, and they're already on top of this. They're like, oh my God, you know, the shot has been fired. We have to meet that. We have to beat Walmart now. And so you're just starting to see a massive, massive number of chargers be installed in a lot of retail locations. Here's a great example. So I was invited to come out and talk about these. So these are level 2 Tesla chargers. This is actually a public ramp, a parking ramp. And these are old, these are Gen 1 Tesla units on the wall. And the apartment building, back to my apartment connection here, wanted to know what they should recommend to the city, because this parking ramp is used for public parking during the day and apartment parking overnight. And they wanted to add a lot more of these chargers down the wall and get rid of these Gen 1 chargers and put in something new. And I think that's just an example of where you're starting to see so much charging becoming available in public, private, lifestyle spaces. It's really changed it quite a bit. And the whole Walmart thing is just like I said, that's just, you know, 30,000 places to charge coming across North America is going to be a whole new ballgame there in the next 3 to 5 years. Here's that question I asked you earlier. California has 50% more EV chargers than gas nozzles. This is absolutely crazy. But they're estimating that there's 120,000 gas nozzles in the state compared to 178,000 public or shared private EV chargers. So what is a shared private EV charger? This would be like that one I just showed you in the previous. It's a public ramp, basically, but it's privately run or privately funded. It's not through the city or the county or the state or the that's kind of different there. But here's the asterisk on this. This is true, but note that they're using 162,000 level 2 chargers to make that claim. Now, I think that's fair, but I also think it's kind of shady. It's fair because level 2 charging is 85% of EV charging, right? During the day or overnight. But you have to understand that that's comparing stations to stations or nozzles and ports. So it's kind of have to look real carefully at the wording that they're using there. But back to Tom that asked the question earlier, electricity is everywhere, right? So it's only a question of if you plug in the outlet, what your computer's plugged into right now, an EV will charge at 3, 4, 5 miles per hour off a 120 volt outlet. So I have these people all the time that come to my presentations. They're like, yeah, well, we can't get an EV because we go to the cabin up north. And I said, well, is it an off-grid cabin? Oh, no, it's not. It's a home. We have electricity. I go, do you have an electric dryer or an electric stove? Oh, yeah. And I go, you have enough electricity to drive an EV up there by far. You could just plug it into the 120 volt outlet, stay there for 2 or 3 days. Your car will fill up. You can drive home, or certainly get enough to go to a fast charger on the way home, right? But it's really important to point out wherever there's electricity, you can charge an EV. And we're starting to see this shift of gas stations becoming, electric charging stations as well. Here's a great example of this. And I want to spend a little time on this because this one's hitting real close to home. So there's a place called Docks Landing up on 694 in White Bear Lake. It is not this building, but it's got the same vibe and the same feel, right? This charging network is called IONNA, and basically it's BMW, General Motors, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes, Stellantis, which is Chrysler, and Toyota, the 8 largest automotive brands, not Tesla or Ford, okay? But they're talking about putting in 30,000 charging spots by the end of 2030 as well. So we were at 50. Walmart's going to do 30,000. Now we're going to do another 30,000 in the next 5 years, right? So we're going to have, we're getting close to the same number of gas stations, literally. It's getting crazy. So that idea of what's happening in California is spreading across North America. The IONNA network is basically a bunch of car companies that figured out that they can sell electricity in the future and make money off of that. And what's interesting about IONNA is it has that concept. If you look real carefully in the store here, this is a real picture. You see those vending machines right there? So there's vending here. This is like the little lobby. This door goes into like a WeWork zone. So like a like a private work zone that you can reserve with that credit card reader right there on an app, right? And then you have over here kind of like tables to go sit and hang out for the 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes that your car is charging. So the idea of a new version of a convenience store where you could check your email or get something from the vending machine, this is called a rechargery. That's the name that they're using. And things are really changing when it comes to electric car charging and merging that lifestyle together, okay? Here's a quick look at the Tesla charging network. All of the fast chargers are these little dots right here. You can see right here what we have. We have a couple different versions because some of these are available to all cars, right? So this is Worthington, Minnesota, by the way, at the Hy-Vee. They just upgraded that from 8 to 12 stalls, and they went from 125 to 250 kilowatt kW. So they increase the number of stalls and the speed, just like we've been talking about from a trend here. But you can see which ones are open and you kind of get the idea. There's plenty of charging today, over 50,000 ports, and a lot more coming. And this is the slide that I wanted to talk about earlier. We're talking about, will you run out? This was a Tom slide where we were talking, and I said, you're going to know in the car how far you're going to go, and you're going to know in the electric car where the charging stations are at on a map on the screen, right? You're going to get feedback from how fast does it charge? Is there a wait at this charger? If you don't stop at this one, what's the next one that you will stop at, right? So there's a lot of information that's being presented in the app on the car screen. And the data is coming faster and faster, where we're starting to get real-time feedback, where people are saying, you know, this was a great charge. There's burritos on sale 100 feet around the corner at the mall at Tom's Burrito Shop or whatever. We're starting to see that kind of information show up in the cars. And when I go out and talk to people about electric car charging, I always say, do you want them to navigate to your front door and park at your business? That's possible if you have electric car charging. They will literally pick your front door and navigate to your spot, especially for hotels. That's a great selling story there. But there's a lot of information coming back on why you will not run out. Some people will run out, we'll tow them or get them a jump or whatever it takes to get them there. But vast majority of information is becoming much more complex, much more real time, and a lot of information on why you're not going to run out. All right. Carol asked about curbside charging in the handicap zone. This is something that's just happened in New York, and this was just happened here in April. San Francisco launched curbside EV charging. So with this device up here, that's what they. This is a very European looking charging hub. This is in Amsterdam. Right here, you can see this is an old charge point tower with the flap right there, but this is the new modern version. Why this is important is I want to contrast that to this charger on the right. This is the EV spot charger program in St. Paul and Minneapolis that the federal government put out there to do research on for 5 years. Notice that they have cables here on a retractable cord, okay? Notice that the cable here is bring your own cable. You keep the cable in your car in Europe. You don't get a cable with the charger. Some of them do, but this is kind of a newer curbside design where you bring, basically it's a male end cable, right? It's got prongs on both ends, if you want to think of it that way, right? And this is the Amsterdam picture down here, where they have them basically along the canal. And these are city-run charging stations. And I just was amazed to see these everywhere in Amsterdam. There's the canal right there. And under that canal, just a quick aside, there's 3,000 cars parked under that canal of water in downtown Amsterdam. That's crazy. All right. I wanted to talk about the curbside charging program because it changes the model to who owns the charger, right? The property owner, the building, the quadplex, if you want to think about the apartment building, they're giving them a chance to bring electricity from their building underneath the sidewalk up into one of these devices here, right? And then publish it on a Google Maps or on an app, and then say, here's how much electricity costs at this charging spot. This completely flips who does the install, completely flips the profit model, because now the property makes that money on selling electricity, upselling electricity, right? So, and the city could do it as well, but it's kind of who invested the capital into it. And these are the kind of things that the whole EV Spot program was to figure out, how do you go from a private property over a public property, the sidewalk, into putting in one of these charging stations. So it really has been some interesting research to figure out all the issues. There's been a lot of conversations around light post charging because a lot of old light posts had incandescent light bulbs. and now they've been updated to LED light bulbs. And so there's extra power available at all of those street lamps that have been updated to LEDs, right? And so the idea was, well, if we already have power at that lamp post, couldn't we just put one of these, silver boxes, 2 or 3 parking spots away on both sides of there, have the smart charging systems, share power. And again, it's all on the app. You just walk up, there's Bluetooth enablement here. You just bring the charger close to it, kind of like, when you double click like on your phone, your cell phone, and you get like an Apple payment. It's that near frequency availability as well. So it really flips the model on a lot of charging and things going forward. And roughly it's medium to low speed overnight 25 miles per hour charge rate. So anyway, that's what's going on in the charging space. I see there's questions.
Yeah, H. Thomas first.
Go for it.
What was the previous slide? The bottom line was 25 miles per hour charging rate.
25 miles per hour of charging puts that much energy back into your battery overnight. So the average person drives 36 miles a day. So if you were to put your car there for 10 hours overnight while it's parked, you'd get 250 miles back in the battery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's actually, yeah, I know. Lots coming at you. I told you, I do this every day or every week nearly, and not these slides, but like I said, that's kind of why I wanted to start with some of the basics here, because there's a lot of crazy.
I had visions of a charger rolling down the street at 25 miles an hour.
No, this is the future right here. This model in the bottom left corner, this little post, and this is the new version. And the new post in Amsterdam looks exactly like this as well. The company is called It's Electric, and they're out of New York City, and they have a partnership in New York City, and they just opened San Francisco. So, and they're hedge fund held. So I've tried to invest. You can't, not yet. But it really flips the whole charging model because, as Carol mentioned earlier, where do I charge my car if I'm living in an apartment or a condo and I only have curbside parking, right? And especially a lot of older neighborhoods, that's an issue. And again, if the city of Minneapolis said, hey, we're going to do 10,000 parking spots across the city, all of a sudden that is the rate for everybody else, right? So it could really change the dynamics of availability. The EV spot program is cutting edge. This is where the U.S. government put that program out there to learn how to do this process going forward. The best practices from this program are already flowing to New York and San Francisco on how to do this kind of a curbside charging program. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, there are a couple. I want to ask you directly the question that I put into the chat, and that is about the capacity of our power generation and distribution grid. There are a couple of things going on here. One is the big increase in electrical vehicles, but there's also things like AI data centers and so forth that are going to have huge demands on our power grid. And I'm wondering what you see going forward is the capacity, how we're going to be able to handle that.
Well, number one, there's a lot here. The CEOs of all the major utilities say this is not a problem. We're not going to melt the grid, which is the phrase that comes up all the time. Why? Because it takes time to build cars and to spread them out and for people to buy them, just like it takes time to add an apartment complex or build an AI data center, right? So time is on the side of the utilities. Where you can connect is they control, right? So you can't just plop a data center in downtown Minneapolis. It has to be, in Anoka or whatever, where they're building one. We're going to need more generation eventually. It's important to understand that studies have been done through the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, out in Boulder, with real-time data that about 25 to 35% of the cars today could be converted to EVs, and we would need no new generation for those cars. Because when you charge is the key. back to my air conditioner story earlier, if you charge your car at that time on August 12th at 6 p.m. when the grid is peaking, you will pay a fortune for that if it's on a variable meter. So what you're seeing is these low-cost overnight EV programs. That's the Excel program called EV Accelerate, but all the co-ops are doing it as well. They have massive generation available overnight because people go to sleep and they're not at work, right? I run my home on what we call off-peak rate electricity. From 9p to 9a, I pay 6 cents a kilowatt hour for the energy in my home. During the day, in the summer, I pay 21 cents from 9a to 9p. Okay, so I never charge my car during the day, always overnight, just like my cell phone on the side of the bed, right? So we're going to charge electric cars, scooters, trucks overnight first. But eventually, 2030, 2040, 2050, when we start getting up there, it's going to change. The other key factor here is that cars last 10, 15, 17 years. The average number today is around 12 and a half years is the life of a vehicle. So you're only replacing a new car every 12, 15 years, right? Let's just say 12 years for simple math. And at the current rate in the United States, only 10% of those new cars are electric. So you can see that 12 years and only 10%, even if it grows to 20%, 30%, or 40%, it's going to take 12 to 15 years. So this is why people are freaking out today that are in the climate change business or climate change education business, saying we're going to have cars that today are going to last for 15 more years on gas, right? They're not going to become electric. So a key part of it is when do they charge and then how do they charge? And back to this vehicle to grid idea, we're going to see smart charging become very, very important. I don't know if you know this or not, but today in the Apple phone world, you can flip a switch on your iPhone. It says, charge my phone whenever it's best for the grid, right? Artificial intelligence can look at that and say, oh, we can look at MISO. We can say, oh, there's a storm front coming through. Wow, we have massive amounts of wind energy tonight at 1 to 3 o'clock. We're going to charge all the phones and cars there. By the way, Tesla does that also with AutoBidder. So the artificial intelligence is a good thing and a bad thing, where we can basically have smart devices that charge when there's lots of electricity available on the internet or on the grid by the internet interacting with that.
Okay, so the power companies are all aware of this because it takes years to create a new power generation facility.
Yeah, exactly. So that's called grid resource planning. That was, if you are a member of Fresh Energy or any of those kind of clean energy think tanks that advocate to the PUC how fast we can, quote unquote, turn off the coal plant at Sherco and put up, 350 acres of solar panels, right, that run a couple 100,000 houses. These are the conversations that have to happen to get into the grid resource planning. And we'll get into this in a little bit later in the slides here, but we're putting up massive amounts of wind and solar right now, because once you build a coal plant, once you build a nuclear power plant, they stick around for decades upon decades upon decades. So the only question is, we're adding new electricity generation and not really turning off the old generation, and that's kind of the, I'll say where the rubber meets the road. When can we turn off certain power plants and do certain things? And there's been a huge push by keeping nuclear power plants on. And I don't know if you know this or not, but they've just gotten another longer lease to basically push the biggest power generation we have here, the nuclear power plants, out another 25 years. That was just okayed through the PUC. I think the number is, I could be wrong on this, I think the oldest nuclear power plant will be 60 years old at the end of that next 20-year lease or something like that.
Longer than they had planned. We have two more questions, but it sounds like you have we only have 15 or 20 minutes left.
Oh,
So,
I got lots to talk about. Here's
yeah,
what we'll do. I will rip through some more slides, and if anybody wants to have a version 2 or talk to me one-on-one, it's as easy as creating a Zoom link and we can sit and chat. And I've got, like I said, 400 slides. I can talk about this all day. So let's keep moving. Where are we not moving? There we go. All right, let's move on to weather, disasters. Things are getting crazy much faster than people anticipated. In 2024, we had 27 $1 billion disasters. You can see them on the screen. So the question is, how soon before we have more disasters?
I'm not seeing them on the screen.
You should be able to see them on the screen. It's on my screen.
yeah, it's on mine.
Yeah, so it takes a while. It's a big, dense slide. But we're going to have more disasters. That's just simply the way things are at. The temperature is getting warmer. My friend lives down here in Florida. There was a buoy off the coast of Miami. The ocean hit 103 degrees last year. Just kind of think about that for a second. How can the ocean be 103 degrees? They thought the system was broke. And they checked it, it was not broke. That's how bad things are. I'll give you a picture. Did you see the big wildfire smoke that came across northern Minnesota this week? Well, here's a picture of that wildfire up in Manitoba and how the smoke was coming across. Notice the size of these lakes and notice the size of those flames. That is what you call a wildfire in Canada. And we're going to have a lot more of those in Minnesota. All right, I'm going to just kind of keep ripping here. Temperatures rising very quickly. 2024 was the hottest year on record for the very first time. We hit the global average of more than 1.5% C, which was the threshold that we were supposed to hit decades from now. Okay, the Earth is basically the hottest it's been in 125,000 years. And there's going to be ramifications from that. Let's talk about air quality. Did you see that the American Lung Association put out the Twin Cities report and Minnesota failed in their pollution report? And we don't even have that dirty of air compared to everybody else. Basically, clean air is an issue. You can look at the 2025 State of Air report and find out what's going on. Basically, it has to do with those small particulate matter, 2.5 micron things. Where you probably have heard end up in your lungs. These are 30 times smaller than the size of a hair. It's those kind of particulate emissions that come from diesel trucks and things like that and end up in our lungs. This is one of the reasons why electric school buses are a really important thing, because young lungs are particularly susceptible to those very small particles. All right, did you read the World Meteorological Association organization came out with their global prediction for the next 5 years? Just came out last week. I will summarize. It's not looking good, folks. That's the bottom line. We potentially will hit 2 degrees above in the next 5 years. And also, I love this particular one. This is just crazy. The average Arctic temperature anomaly over the next 5 extended winters is expected to be 2.4 degrees more, 3.5 times more than the anomaly we've had in the past. That's how fast the Arctic is heating up. I'll let you dig into that if you want. All right, that's one more section. We've got EV regulation. I can do this one very quickly. So you may remember that back in 2019, we had the clean cars. This was bloodbath fighting at the Capitol in Minnesota. We became the 14th state in the United States to say we would support clean cars. Basically, this is the California CARB conversation that has been in the news this week that was just struck down by Congress. Basically, it allowed us to say that we were going to control our emissions in the state of Minnesota and that it would force auto manufacturers to bring a lot more cars to parking lots to choose from. The infamous example was you couldn't get a Toyota RAV4 plug-in within 5 years because they were none allocated to Minnesota because we were not a clean car state. I would tell you it's better, not much, but this is when we came out with the 20% of new car sales by 2030 will be EVs conversation. We definitely need to talk about this because this is a really big milestone. In the first time it's ever happened, clean energy beat fossil fuels on the electric grid last month across the USA. This is wild. Sunnier and windy days help propel the clean sources past gas and coal in March of 2025. Major milestone. This is at the USA level. This has happened on a state-by-state level. This has happened at a subsection of the grid. This has happened in smaller sections by hour, by minute, but never before for a month across the US. This is absolutely amazing. And this, by the way, this is, we're behind Europe again on this whole thing. Germany hit this 6 years ago, just to give you a frame of reference. This on the right-hand side is the forecasted policies for generation from the International Energy Association, showing you that wind and solar are coming to the grid faster than anything else in the world. It's been changing dramatically. We don't have time to go into this, but this is the virtual power plant tracker map. And I mentioned this earlier. This has a lot to do with the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission looking into demand response, looking into DERMS, looking into vehicle to grid, and we are going to have some changes there. Xcel is going to have to start doing a pilot in this whole space. Remember what I said, it's a technology issue of coordinating all these resources. Today, it does happen, but it happens by vertical. In other words, the Tesla Powerwall through Tesla to the utility. Why this is important and why this comes up for me is because when you get to an apartment complex, there's one building that I've done in downtown Minneapolis. They have 700 cars in 4-story parking ramp. We put 150 chargers in there. That amount of energy is basically big enough to become an asset or not to the grid at Xcel's level, because charging or not charging is a big deal for that. And so it was a key part of the conversation to do something called ADR, which is basically a big lever for Xcel to say, we're in crunch mode, don't charge the cars right now. Okay, that's a very simplified version of it. If you want to know more about that, love to have coffee over that. All right, we talked about this earlier with these zero emission zones. Again, this is Amsterdam. Alan's completely amazed that in downtown Amsterdam, you can smell the flowers. And here's an electric postal truck delivering mail inside the zero emission zone. And I was completely, these are not the pictures I took, but this is the exact same spot that I was standing when this happened. I did look this up. But you can see here, what is a zero emission zone? Basically 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. charges apply if you come into this block by block area that says no diesel particulate matter, no heavy trucks can come in here, things like that. I thought it was quite interesting. We have 13 of those zones around the world today. Maybe we'll have more. London is a big one. San Francisco has a big one. New York is battling it out with the current administration about that. Of course, they don't like those. But this idea of having places where you have high density of people pushing the pollution out, the concentrated pollution out of those spots where the people live. I thought it was amazing that 340 European cities and towns, for an impact of 150 million people, have already implemented some kind of restriction on personal car usage. The last time I was in Munich, I lived overseas for 3 years, so I have several friends, and we just went back to friends of our daughters got married, and we were in Munich, and the debate was, we were going into the center of Munich, and the question came up, should we take the train or should we drive? Because we were going to meet some people at a different restaurant a little bit of ways away. We actually changed the location of the restaurant that we were going to so that we didn't take the car into the center of the city to pay congestion fees. And I'm just sitting here going, wow, have we ever thought like that in the United States? I haven't seen it where I live. I think it does happen on the East and West Coast, but it was quite surprising to me that it is a normal part of life. Do we want to go into the congestion zone and pay the fee or not? All right, one more section. Top 10 selling EVs or top 10 selling vehicles. How many of them are EVs? I was surprised by this, frankly speaking. I had this question a couple weeks ago in a presentation. All the yellows are all battery electric vehicles. Okay. The green are plug-in hybrid, and the red is a gas car, a hybrid. Only Toyota Camry today doesn't offer a plug-in version or an all-electric version of the top 10 selling vehicles in the first quarter of 2025. I really would like to know what the top 25 looks like, but I was surprised because I didn't know about the Nissan Rogue, the Hyundai, and the Honda CR-V. I thought they were only gas cars, but they've switched. Toyota is electrifying, as they say, but not all electric and not plug-ins. Only a couple of brands, or RAV and the Prius in the Toyota world. So enough of that. I'm often asked this question, and I talked about this earlier about EVs becoming more and more valuable. That how do I find one? That's come up a lot in my conversations. I would say good luck. They're super valuable because they still work. There's not a lot of maintenance to them, and all you do is plug them in your garage. If you don't use them a lot, if you're under 36 miles a day, you can get 12 hours of parking and plug it into a 120 volt outlet. And my suggestion is go talk to Pavel at GS Motors. He's been around 10 years. He's an EV dealer that only does used EVs. My other suggestion is go to the Minnesota EV Club and ask all those early adopters if they're selling their cars, because a lot of them like to buy the new latest greatest thing, and people like to get their old cars. Facebook Marketplace, online, a lot of gas car dealers like to get rid of those EVs, so you just kind of have to ask around if you want to find a used EV out there these days. But the price points are becoming very attractive as the tariffs and inflation, and people are like, maybe we should just get that little blue bolt like I talked about on the very first slide. That idea is very much alive from what I'm seeing in the questions I'm getting asked in presentations. What happened with sales on EVs in 2025 Q1? EV sales are still up. A lot of people don't believe this, but it is true. 10%, 11% year over year. January or first quarter is not a good time to buy. Could have been influenced by the threat of the tariffs coming. But total vehicle sales were flat. EVs are up. Tesla's down, of course. But the key point was, this is from a Bloomberg article. It was also in Car and Driver magazine. The price penalty, if you want to say it that way, is about $0 to $5,000 for an EV versus a gas car. So we're pretty much as an average. There's definitely cars that are below that, but there's really no extra cost to buy an electric car now, and way cheaper if you consider the total cost of putting gas and oil in the other car. Worldwide EV sales still forecasted at 30%, still forecasted the same for the US, still continuing to grow. You can see how many vehicles were sold. Tesla has traditionally been more than 50% of the market, now down to 47%, I think it was, and falling rather quickly. So there's going to be an opportunity by a lot of other manufacturers to bring EVs to market. You can see that the trend still continues to go up here on a worldwide basis. All right, I think that's pretty much it. I've got a couple cars here on robo-taxis. We already talked about the Norway conversation. There are 95+% cars work in the cold in Norway, so they're going to work here because it's cold here like Norway. But this is a really interesting comment, and I wanted to talk about this because we talked about robo-taxis and EVs driving themselves before we started the actual call for some of you, or the presentation, I should say. So the question I got a long time ago was, does your Tesla drive itself? And I said, the joke is yes, until I take my hands off the wheel. Okay. That's the joke, because in the old Teslas, you had to have your hand on the wheel. It had to feel your hands on the wheel. Then it needs to check in with you. Then it became, does the camera in the cabin see that you're paying attention? And just this week, just this month, we got a new software update. The nag, as it's called, is pretty much going to go away. That only through like watching where your eyes are at and where your head's at do you have to, quote unquote, be prompted to pay attention to driving. But the car is driving itself, and that's been a really key thing. Tesla has driven from LA to San Francisco. That was 4 or 5 years ago. And in January of this year, a Tesla drove across the United States with just 8 seconds of human input per hour as an average, completely across the United States. So there's a real battle going on, obviously, between all of the self-driving companies that are out there. Most of them are using EVs to do this testing, but we'll see. Waymo, I actually made a slide on this, didn't I? Yeah, I did. This was in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Waymo, which is the biggest rideshare company out there, is at 10 million rides with no driver in the car. Expected to be, and it's growing so fast, it's expected to be at 20 million by the end of 2025. They did 700,000 rides per month in March, just in California. So we're moving rapidly over to self-driving cars, and that's going to be really interesting. That is not profitable for Google. Google owns Waymo, right? That's not profitable today. The cars cost a couple $100,000, I think it's $170,000, $250,000 per car. That has been rumored. I've heard as high as $173,000 per car. LiDAR, radar, and 29 cameras and a lot of computing is behind those cars. But things are changing real rapidly here. The biggest difference between Waymo and Tesla is that Tesla is using a normal, quote unquote, car. They're not adding all this extra stuff to it. They don't have all these cameras. So the question is, how real is that? The other thing to note is all of the Waymos run on pre-mapped roads. So the roads are, this is the digital cookie crumb path through downtown San Francisco, right? Teslas have no cookie crumbs like that we know of publicly. It's simply AI based on camera observation and recognition. So very, very different strategy. And again, how fast can you download the software after AI crunching it and making the cars better? It's simply downloading software overnight, and then the car has a whole new level of features. Okay. School buses, I mentioned this earlier, they're happening in a big way in Minnesota, and this was a couple years ago. We had those at the State Fair at the Eco Exchange Building, but we're starting to see a lot more electric school buses, and this is really important because of the pollution I mentioned for the younger kids. And I'm going to end with this one. This is the biggest what if I've ever seen. EV vertical takeoff and landing, I call them drones. Some people call them airplanes, but the idea of having air taxis. So these, the Joby is a pretty famous one out there. The FAA is got to be looking at that in 2025. It has 6 propellers, 4 batteries for 150 miles of range at 200 miles an hour, which is crazy. So with people, a pilot and 4 people and suitcases, you could make the run from Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport to Mayo Clinic in Rochester and back in less than 30 minutes. You could basically go, one's going down while one's coming back up. And we're already seeing that these are real on the East and West Coast. And I thought that would be quite amazing if you were to look at what electric airplanes will do to the aviation industry, because now you could dispatch one of these upper pictures in the upper right-hand corner of this Joby. You could go pick people up in Worthington or St. Cloud and bring them to the airport, right? No more driving. Let's make the run up to, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Let's go pick up people and bring them over. Imagine if you had 100, 500 of these things taking off from the Crystal Airport, the Eden Prairie Airport, just running people and bringing them back to one central location, like the landing pad at MSP. So it gets kind of crazy to think about what that could look like. But this plane on the bottom, which was that company shuttles people from Seattle out to the San Juan Islands. And I've taken not this plane, but one of their planes in the past, many years ago. And it really struck me that in 2019, they electrified some of those planes and they started coming out with an electric airplane in 2020, and it made a 100-mile flight possible, which is more than enough to take off from downtown Seattle as a float plane and go across and then drop you off like on a San Juan Island or some of those remote islands over there, and then come back to the base. And so it gives you an idea of just how far along we are in electrifying aviation. And you know that a battery powered glider went around the face of the earth on just sunshine, right? That's been well known. There's documentaries about that. But this air taxi route idea is happening, and I think it's going to be amazing what happens in the aviation space with battery airplanes. And we won't talk about semi-trucks except to say that short-haul trucks work really well. Semis are going to be positive pencil-wise, making positive ROI by 2030. The charging network is the biggest challenge. Again, Tesla and a couple of other semi companies are building charging networks, like from Southern California to Texas, or from Chicago to Milwaukee, between Boston, New York, Philly, up the corridor. So we're starting to already see that here in the United States. And this is already happening in Europe on a regular basis, and China has gone crazy with this whole idea of electric semis and things like that. There's cities in China with 18,000 electric buses, Shanghai, Beijing. So, but heavy duty trucks and heavy duty vehicles, getting rid of the diesel is a big part of that conversation. We can talk about that offline if you want to talk about that, or you could read the report, and it talks about building these electric corridors on the East and West Coast. That's it. How did I do on time? Oh, I'm over 7 minutes.
Well, you did pretty
You're
well.
fine.
We do have a couple hands up.
Yes, bring it on. Let me get
Go
on
ahead, Dean.
sharing.
I will like collect myself. I have a severe back injury. I was trying to log in bed, but I'll have a conversation with Stan about that. It took me an hour, 2.5 hours to get out of bed.
Okay, what's the question?
No, I will defer to H Tom, please, and I'll collect myself.
Okay, go ahead. H.
When I saw the Joby, my first thought was ambulance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ambulance is a real thing, and
Organ transplants.
And learning to fly. So this is real today here in Minnesota Crystal Airport. You have to get so many hours to learn to fly. You can take an electric airplane that's much cheaper to fly and do touch and goes, right? That is a use real case today.
Yeah.
But yes, lots of, I mean, the drone space is crazy. Just so many things to think about there. But just beyond, a package being dropped, from a string in your backyard, just think about how you could change the entire aviation industry if you had 100 miles out and 100 miles back, or 75 miles out and 75 miles back, and you had an app. You just say, like an Uber, just pick me up in Worthington at the baseball diamond or whatever, at the heliport, right? And I'm going to not drive. I'm just going to shuttle into the airport.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking under 500 feet. There's no obstacles for the ambulance.
Yeah, exactly.
Going
Fast.
and coming back.
Yep. You just land on the freeway, pick people up, take them to the hospital, drop them off. Yeah, it's totally available.
That's small enough you could land at a street intersection.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It looks big in some of those pictures and kind of menacing, but they're 4 people and a pilot and some suitcases behind. So you can imagine how big, that it's like a little flying car, if you want to think of it that way.
Pilot, doctor, gurney, attendant.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Eric.
Stretcher.
Yeah, you see that with the helicopters today, right?
Go ahead, Eric.
I didn't want to start talking about this yet much until I got better, solider numbers. But as far as to an partial answer to the huge negative objection of the huge soaring demand on the power grid becoming because of the huge power needs of data centers.
Yeah.
I just learned that Elon's already got the cost of moving mass into orbit down to $10 to $12 a kilo, and that's from his recent announcement. That's going to go much more. He's going to be building 2 to 3 starships a week pretty soon at his space base. Well, I started wondering, is it getting feasible to build data centers in orbit? and thereby empower them with a vast amount of free 724 non-polluting solar energy.
Yep.
I looked at a little bit on AI, and it's amazing how helpful. I got to do more, but I got a rough ballpark figure or something like
I haven't
for 100
eaten it yet.
gigawatt.
I might have another one.
For 100 gigawatt, no, 100 megawatt data center, which is among the biggest current ones, comes out to something like 400 million, which is kind of chump change with the many billions that the big enterprises are spending on data centers now. So I definitely think it's going to become feasible for that. It would take a huge amount of demand off the Earth-based power grid.
Yeah, or bury them under the water. That's been a real big thing too, is to put data centers under the water because of the cooling. So if you put them in the ocean, 30, 20 miles, 20 miles offshore and 5 exit, it works. They actually have live pilots of that in Europe. You can see that.
You could generate a lot of energy from wave action.
All right, bullshit. You're gonna heat 104-degree ocean. Okay, great.
No, you don't need heat. You could use wave action. Go ahead.
A lot of data centers use a lot of water today for cooling, right? So that's one of the things that they need water for.
But live water in the ocean is not going to be heating. That is going to disrupt any number of ecosystems.
Yeah. Can I get in? I've been waiting. I got my massage.
Go ahead, Dean.
Report from the left coast, because you have hit so many buttons in 10 minutes there with me in carbon. So report from the left coast. I've been wrestling with an EV plug-in hybrid, yada yada. I said, screw this. I'm getting a plug-in. I'll keep my CRV. There goes my range anxiety, but I'm getting over that. The conundrum here is, California, Governor Newsom took off the state incentive, because they didn't need an incentive. We were buying 40% of all EVs sold in the country. And so that's gone, but I did get the federal, and I escaped the tariffs. I bought a Mini. So my conundrum now is, how do I charge it green? How do I charge it cheaply? See, gasoline currently in California is about 2/3 higher than where you and everybody else. Electricity is 3 to 4 times higher. I finally got my Mini hooked up, and I'm watching my meter, and it's spinning backwards at 3.78 kilowatts. And then when I plug in my EV, in the middle of the day, California sunshine, I was drawing a couple of 100 watts. I said, okay, I can live with that. But you see, our peak rates are pushing 80 cents per kilowatt hour at night. So do I plug in then? I sell it to SDG&E at like a nickel or 8 cents, and I buy it back at anywhere from 26 to 78 cents. I'm paying them that price to be my battery, because the electric companies here despise EVs. They wanted them, and now suddenly they go, be careful what we wished for. And it's a real conundrum. But anyway, I am extremely happy with my EV. Thanks to Stan and the guy who, I can't remember his name, that has a website with a list of all the EVs, and I am very happy. That's a report from the left coast.
Thank you. 90% of the people that get an EV say they're happy with it. Only, I would say 7 to 10% is what the statistics are, would think about going back. And most of them want to go, if you look at those numbers and break it down, they want to go back to a plug-in hybrid. So there's the happiness level, if you want to consider that, is really high for EV.
I can understand that, because my CRV could have gone away with a plug-in hybrid. I go, oh, wait, why do I want 3 systems or 4 systems when I can have 2 systems, charging and electric? Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
It was very
Is that it?
Yeah.
That's everybody?
Yeah.
That's everybody.
I guess I was just going to ask if your we're going to address what they're going to do about fires, electric vehicle fires.
Yeah. So a bunch of the questions you guys asked are kind of in another group of slides that I do after my normal presentation, what I call the frequently asked questions. Fires is definitely one that comes up. Well, first of all, we haven't had EV fires yet, and there's going to be a lot less EV fires than gas fires. That's a key thing to understand. The numbers are dramatically different. So there's a gas car every 5 minutes in North America. There's an EV fire in places like Norway, 16 in a year. So you can run the calculations there. Australia was 6 zeros and a 1 before there was a fire involved with an EV. So it's just, it doesn't happen, is really part of the story. They are horrible because the batteries do burn at a much higher temperature, so it's kind of impossible to put them out. Like I said earlier, I speak a lot at the Rotary Club and League of Women Voters, things like that. And I've asked police chiefs and fire chiefs on the microphone, what's your policy? And have you had EV fires? And the general consensus is that they're bad if they happen. They're going to cause a lot of problems, but they haven't had any yet. They have had power tools and electric bikes that have been an issue. And the biggest challenge there is, and wheelchair or assisted wheelchairs that charge out in the hall with no one around them. Those are the 3 scenarios that they brought up. So when it comes to tools, make sure that you use the battery charger that the battery came with. So don't use the DeWalt charger with the Milwaukee battery, okay? That is a known problem, okay? E-bikes. Make sure you take the battery out and bring it up into your living room or your kitchen and charge when you are watching it. I have a condo that I've worked with in St. Paul that just had an e-bike fire, 4 units and $4 million later. It's a lot of lawsuits and a lot of issues. And I know that garage really well because I put 100 plus charging stations in that garage out of 163 parking spots. They went almost over 50%. Not all of them put a charger in, but they wired for it. So I know that homeowner association very, very well. And it's a real disaster, long and the short of it. So e-bikes are an issue. The wheelchairs is a real problem as well. The hover around wheelchairs assisted. That was one of the biggest concerns that the fire chiefs had when I asked them about EV cars. So that's kind of where things are at. You can see the studies again. I tell people, if this was a problem, there would be fires every day in Norway. If they're at 95, 96% of new car sales, 44% of cars on the road are EVs in Norway. If fires were a problem with EVs, there would be lots of news on that. It just isn't happening. It has happened, but the frequency is so low. The other thing I point out to people is just remember the average gas tank size in North America is 14 gallons of gas. Let's say you don't run it down to 0. Let's say you got 7 gallons of gas. 7 gallons of gas in every one of the cars in the garage. What's the most common thing that causes a car to start on fire? Electronics. So there are problems with electronics in cars starting fires and having thousands of gallons of gasoline in the garage below where you sleep. That's a frequent question I get in the condo association, homeowner association space. Questions?
Well, yeah. So, right. I understand the frequency of electric, and we just had some fires in SoCal. You might have heard about them, and the firefighters were pulling their hair out. We can't put this out. There's nothing we have. You just let them burn, baby, burn.
Yeah.
But that makes news. But that was one hundredth of 1%
Sure.
of what the damage was. But it makes beautiful news. Electric car that nobody can put out, and yada yada yada. But yeah, that you just mentioned, that interface between having an electronics in a gas vehicle that shorts and does all kinds of things,
especially as they get older. If you look at the statistics from the Fire Protection Association, FPA.org, who have done EV studies, by the way, on fires, The most common reason that a car starts on fire is it's older, it's the electronics, and that's what causes the problem.
Yep. And then we get into elitism. So great. So don't drive an older car. Well, what if that's all you can afford? What if you can't buy a new car every 3 months?
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
All right, anything else? I gotta go mow the lawn.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Alan. That was great.
That was excellent, Alan.
Good presentation. Really
Thank you,
great.
Alan.
Thank you.
And I hope, let me, who's ever hosts now, let me make sure I save the chat. I'll do that right now before you guys totally bail out here.
I'm on my phone. I'm up eating lunch, and I'll close down.
We saw you eating a delicious sandwich, Stan.
I'm going to close down this meeting when it's done.
All right, let me give me a second to and later, Stan, we'll talk about how I get in from my phone when I can't get out of bed.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care. Eric, you got something? You got your hand up there?
Yeah, they mentioned the increasing dangers and costs of wildfires, especially from Canada. And well, yeah, when my son and I drove across Canada in 2015, we passed at least 3 army convoys going to fight the fires. Well, the only longer-term solution that pops to mind is robots, some kind of robotized firefighting forces.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things I ever saw was the Wildfire Museum at Sault Ste. Marie. I did that circle tour around Lake Superior in my EV a few years ago. I didn't plan to stop there, but we were talking to a lady, and I said, "So, like, what should we do while we're here?" You know, go to the firefighter museum. That museum was fantastic. They had like real airplanes in a hangar with like the scoop underneath where they come down and scoop water out of lakes and all that kind of stuff. It was phenomenal. But I could definitely see where drones going forward, especially for the AI surveillance, would be huge. There's been a lot of talk about AI drone surveillance for hurricanes. That's become a real thing. Being able to get the drone up, look at the path, and go, $47 million or whatever was destructed. So I don't know. We'll see.
We better have something because they're firing everybody at NOAA, and
yeah,
we got to have something.
FEMA's gone.
Palantir should be able to help a lot with that, with their total resource allocation, and I'll talk about that on the 21st. But yeah, they could coordinate all the information, predicting the dangers and detecting the fires, and then deploying whatever resources are available most efficiently to fight them.
Yeah, it's changing pretty rapidly.
Anyone that wants to listen, when you were talking about the allocation of when and where, 1984 in San Diego, I finally got a house with central air conditioning because I'm a wuss. And I said, cool. And SDG&E said, hey, would you like to sign up for a brownout program and air condition your house for virtually free? I go, sounds good to me. And they put a smart meter. It's back in the 80s. I don't know how they did it, but they did it.
Yeah.
And they typically never shut me down to less than a 50% duty cycle, but I could go down to as much as a 1/3 duty cycle, and kept the house closed. And I'd hear when the AC would go off, I go, okay, folks, let's hunker down. And it was wonderful. Yeah. Well, we knew about all that stuff in 1984.
Yep.
This
is
the
presentation next week, I think, is Carol Ashmore, right, Carol?
Yep.
And what's the topic?
The topic is, and actually late last night, I sent the advert with picture to David. Okay, so he will have that posted later today.
What is it?
And the topic is on Google utilities that enable us to make much better predictions as futurists.
Is this AI powered?
This is giant data set powered.
Yeah.
And Google utilities that if carefully deployed, will allow us to ferret out truths that we've been unable to come up with before and make much better predictions. And much of this is described in a book called Everybody Lies, not by Dr. House, but by a fellow named Seth Stevens Devadowitz.
Okay, I look forward to that.
Cool.
Thanks,
Take care,
Alan.
everybody. Good to be with you.
Prediction, the holy grail of futurists.
Okay, see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
David, why are you in the car? Is your computer broken or? No, okay. Can't hear you. Bye-bye.
I'm going downstairs to shut down the system right now.
Okay. Thanks for putting on another good presentation.
Yeah.
By the way, I was gonna.
Very well
Did
done.
by the way, I was gonna ask, did the frequent presenter from the past, I guess Jason, did he leave the group?
We have come to that conclusion.
Okay.
He hasn't been here for a while, so.
I'll email him and ask him.
Yeah, I guess there was the last talk he gave. I guess there was like a falling out. Heard that briefly, and then it was abruptly ended on the talk he gave. It was, I guess, I had a political slant or something like that. But
I know that David has been concerned about that, and he was concerned about, there was some feedback. Jason was concerned, Jason was presenting a lot on topics that he knew that would be confrontational. And when he got some pushback, there was some issues there. We don't know. But Jason used to be the leader of this group
Yeah.
at one time. And,
what's his name? Jason Abbott or something?
Abbott. Jason Abbott.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
But he stated that up front. And I sort of kind of stuck up for him, but I don't carry a lot of weight. And, yeah, I mean, I've heard many controversial things said in the last 10, 15 minutes. The T word and the G word, Tesla and Google, because they are anathema to me. So what happens if you don't do Google? What happens if you lead a Google-free lifestyle or try to, you see? And what happens if you don't want to hear about Teslas? We have sold our souls to these, anyway, don't get me going.
He would call them the silicon tar pits. I'm gonna shut it down now, guys. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye, Sam.
Later, between now and next week, teach me how in the hell I get in on my phone. I don't have an invite to pull up a phone number.
I use Meetup. I go to the Meetup and just press on it and it takes me in on the phone.
I have Meetup on my phone, so.
Then you're gonna have to engage in some silicon tar pits enough to get the app.
The Meetup app, I should get that on my phone.
Yeah.
All right, I'll do that.
I'll catch you later, Dean. Take care. Bye-bye.